My name is Rebecca Wilson, and at 38 years old, I found myself standing at my mother's funeral, dreading the moment my sister Stephanie would arrive. 6 years had passed since she stole Nathan, my millionaire fiancé, the man I was planning to spend my life with. I hadn't seen either of them since. When they walked in, Stephanie flashing her diamond ring with that smug smile, I felt a calm I never expected. She had no idea who was waiting to meet her. Before I tell you how my sister's face turned white as a sheet when she saw who I married, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button to join my journey. My mother Eleanor was always the glue that held our family together. Growing up in a modest suburban home outside Boston, she was the one who taught me about strength and dignity. We shared a special bond that only deepened as I grew older. Even after I moved into my own apartment in downtown Boston and built my career as a marketing executive, I called her almost every day. She was my confidant, my advisor, and my biggest cheerleader. When she was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 8 months ago, I felt my world crumbling. Despite the aggressive treatments, we knew time was limited. Mother faced her diagnosis with remarkable grace, more concerned about her family's welfare than her own suffering. Her final weeks were peaceful, surrounded by loved ones in the home where she'd raised us. She slipped away holding my hand, having made me promise to find peace in my life. 6 years earlier, when I was 32, my life had seemed perfect on paper. I had the career, the friends, the nice apartment, but something was missing. I worked 60-hour weeks and dated occasionally, but nothing serious stuck. Then I met Nathan Reynolds at a charity gala through my college friend Allison. Nathan was charismatic, with perfect teeth and confidence that filled the room. A self-made tech millionaire at 36, he had the kind of success story magazines love to feature. Our connection was immediate. We shared a love for art, travel, and ambitious goals. After our first date at an exclusive restaurant overlooking the harbor, I called my mother and told her I'd met someone special. Our relationship progressed quickly. Weekend trips to Martha's Vineyard, box seats at symphony performances, and intimate dinners became our routine. Nathan was attentive and generous, always bringing thoughtful gifts and planning elaborate dates. After 18 months together, during a private dinner on a yacht in Boston Harbor, Nathan proposed with a 5-carat diamond ring. I said yes without hesitation. My parents were thrilled, especially my mother, who immediately began envisioning the perfect wedding. Nathan had the resources to make any wedding dream come true, and Eleanor insisted we shouldn't hold back. Then there was my younger sister, Stephanie. Only 2 years younger than me, we had a complicated relationship growing up. As children, we were close despite the constant competition. Stephanie always wanted what I had, from toys to friends to attention. If I achieved something, she had to match or exceed it. Mother always tried to keep the peace, giving each of us special time and attention. Despite our history, I chose Stephanie as my maid of honor. Mother said it would bring us closer, and I wanted to believe that as adults, we had moved beyond childish jealousy. When I introduced Stephanie to Nathan at a family dinner, she complimented him excessively. I noticed her touching his arm while laughing at his jokes, but dismissed it as Stephanie being her usual charming self. We held our engagement party at my parents' colonial-style home. Stephanie helped Mother with decorations, hanging fairy lights across the backyard and arranging flowers. Throughout the evening, I caught Stephanie watching Nathan across the room, but when our eyes met, she quickly smiled and raised her glass in my direction. Later that night, as guests were leaving, Mother pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Rebecca, dear, I noticed Stephanie seems quite taken with Nathan," she said carefully, arranging leftover appetizers into containers. "She's just being friendly, Mom," I replied, washing champagne flutes in the sink. "Besides, she's dating that pharmaceutical rep, Brian." Mother nodded, but didn't seem convinced. "Just be careful, honey. You know how your sister can get when you have something she admires." I kissed her cheek and assured her everything was fine. "We're adults now, Mom. Stephanie's happy for me. I'm sure of it." How wrong I was. How painfully, devastatingly wrong. 3 months before our wedding, I began noticing subtle changes in Nathan. He started working later, often answering texts at odd hours with the excuse of international clients. Our usual Friday date nights were frequently rescheduled due to emergency meetings. When we were together, he seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly and offering only partial attention to our conversations. More concerning was how he began criticizing things he once loved about me. My laugh was suddenly too loud in public. My favorite blue dress that he previously adored now made me look washed out. Even my habit of reading before bed, which he'd found endearing, became annoying because of the light keeping him awake. Meanwhile, Stephanie started calling more frequently, always with questions about wedding details. "I just want everything to be perfect for my big sister," she'd say, though Mother was handling most of the planning. Stephanie volunteered to help with vendor meetings I couldn't attend due to work commitments. One Thursday evening, Nathan and I had dinner at an upscale Italian restaurant downtown. He barely made eye contact, responding to my stories about work with one-word answers. When his phone buzzed for the 5th time, I reached my limit. "Is there something more important happening elsewhere?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light despite my growing irritation. "Sorry, just work stuff," he muttered, putting his phone face down on the table. You know how it is before a product launch. Later that week, I noticed unfamiliar perfume on Nathan's collar when doing laundry. It was floral and heavy, nothing like the subtle scent I wore. When confronted, Nathan explained he'd been in meetings all day with a potential investor, Rebecca Mills, who apparently wore overpowering perfume and had hugged him goodbye. The explanation seemed plausible. I wanted to believe him. I called my friend Allison, expressing my concerns over coffee the next morning. "Every relationship gets jittery before the wedding," Allison reassured me, stirring her latte. "Parker and I fought constantly the month before our wedding, and now we've been married 5 years. But the knot in my stomach wouldn't dissolve. Mother noticed my anxiety during our weekly lunch. "You seem distracted, sweetheart," she said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "Wedding stress or something else?" I forced a smile. "Just busy with the final arrangements. Everything's fine." But everything wasn't fine. I started making more effort, thinking perhaps I'd been taking Nathan for granted. I booked a spa day, bought new lingerie, tried cooking his favorite meals. The more I tried, the more distant he became. Then came the cake-tasting appointment Nathan had been looking forward to for weeks. That morning, he called claiming an unexpected meeting with investors. "Stephanie can go with you," he suggested. "She knows my preferences anyway." When I hung up, I felt sick. How did my sister know my fiancé's cake preferences better than I did? Still, I accepted her offer to join me. The next day, cleaning Nathan's car before a dinner party, I found an earring wedged between the passenger seat and center console. A dangling silver earring with a tiny sapphire that I immediately recognized as Stephanie's. My sister had worn those earrings to my engagement party, a gift from our grandmother. When I showed Nathan the earring that evening, his face remained perfectly composed. "Oh, your sister must have dropped it when I gave her a ride to the florist last week," he said smoothly. "She mentioned losing an earring." "You never told me you drove Stephanie to the florist," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Didn't I? It must have slipped my mind. It wasn't important." When I called Stephanie, her explanation matched his perfectly. Too perfectly. "Oh, thank goodness. I've been looking everywhere for that earring." Nathan was kind enough to drive me since my car was in the shop. That night, I couldn't sleep, thoughts racing through my mind. Had they rehearsed their story? Was I being paranoid? My weight began dropping from stress, and dark circles formed under my eyes. I started seeing a therapist without telling Nathan. 3 weeks before the wedding, Nathan suggested we postpone. "I'm worried about you, Rebecca. You're not yourself lately. Maybe we're rushing things." I broke down, begging him to tell me what was wrong, what I had done, how I could fix it. He held me, assuring me everything was fine, but his eyes were vacant. That night, I woke at 3 in the morning to find Nathan's side of the bed empty. From the hallway, I heard his hushed voice from the guest bedroom. "Not now. She'll hear us. I know. Soon, I promise." The next day, I decided to surprise Nathan at his office with lunch. My father Thomas called as I was leaving my apartment. Rebecca, are you eating properly? Your mother says you've lost too much weight. We're concerned.
I'm fine, Dad. Elite.
Just pre-wedding jitters. I'm actually bringing Nathan lunch right now.
Good.
That boy better be treating my daughter like a queen. If only he knew. The security guard at Nathan's building recognized me and waved me through with a smile. On the elevator ride to the 12th floor, I checked my reflection in the mirrored wall, trying to smooth the worry lines that had formed between my eyebrows. The lunch bag in my hand contained Nathan's favorite sandwich from the deli across from my office. When I reached the reception area, Nathan's secretary Margot looked up from her computer, her eyes widening with surprise. Rebecca, we weren't expecting you today. Her gaze darted to Nathan's closed office door, then back to me. Nathan is, in a meeting right now. That's okay, I said, lifting the lunch bag. I just brought him lunch. I can wait. Margot stood quickly, blocking my path. Actually, he specifically asked not to be disturbed. Perhaps I could let him know you're here? Something in her nervous manner triggered my suspicions. Is he alone in there, Margot? Her hesitation told me everything. Before she could respond, I walked past her and pushed open Nathan's office door. The scene burned into my memory forever. Nathan leaning against his desk, his hands on my sister's waist, her arms wrapped around his neck, their lips locked in a passionate kiss. Neither noticed me at first, giving me several excruciating seconds to absorb every detail. Stephanie's skirt pushed up, Nathan's tie loosened, the familiarity in their embrace that spoke of countless similar moments. When the door clicked shut behind me, they sprang apart. 3 faces frozen in a tableau of shock. Rebecca. Nathan recovered first, straightening his tie. This isn't what it looks like. Stephanie didn't even attempt such a transparent lie. Instead, she lifted her chin defiantly. We didn't plan this. It just happened. The calm that washed over me was surprising. How long? Nathan glanced at Stephanie, then back to me. Rebecca, let's discuss this privately.
How long?
My voice remained steady. For months, Stephanie answered. Since the engagement party. For months. Nearly half our engagement. While I'd been selecting wedding invitations and choosing floral arrangements, they had been betraying me. Nathan moved behind his desk, distancing himself physically as if preparing for a business negotiation. I didn't mean for this to happen, Rebecca. Sometimes feelings change. I was going to tell you after. After what? After the wedding? After our honeymoon? I was trying to find the right time. His voice had the practiced smoothness he used for difficult client meetings. The lunch bag dropped from my hand. I trusted you. Both of you. Stephanie at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. It just happened, Becca. We tried to fight it. Don't call me Becca. The childhood nickname felt like another violation. And nothing just happens for 4 months. You made choices. Every secret call, every lie, every time you looked me in the eye knowing what you were doing. Nathan pressed the intercom button. Margot, please come in. Moments later, Margot appeared, pointedly avoiding my gaze. Please escort Rebecca out. She's upset. I'm escorting myself out, I said, my dignity somehow intact despite feeling shattered inside. You deserve each other. In the elevator, the tears finally came. By the time I reached my car, I was struggling to breathe between sobs. The drive home remains a blur in my memory. I only remember calling my mother from my apartment, curled on the bathroom floor, unable to form coherent sentences through my crying. Mother and father arrived within the hour, using their emergency key to enter when I couldn't bring myself to open the door. Mother held me while I told them everything, father pacing the living room, his face growing redder with each detail. I'll kill him, he muttered, hand over his heart. Both of them. Thomas, your blood pressure, Mother warned, though her own face showed equal fury. The next days passed in a haze of pain. Mother helped me call vendors to cancel wedding arrangements, while Father handled the financial aspects. When I returned the engagement ring to Nathan's apartment, left with the doorman, I couldn't bear to see him. I found Stephanie had already moved her things in. Most of her clothes were there, family photos arranged on shelves that once held mine. Nathan's email about dividing our shared assets was coldly efficient, mentioning that Stephanie had helped him catalog my remaining belongings. The betrayal ran deeper than I initially realized. Through mutual friends, I learned they had been meeting secretly whenever I worked late or traveled for business. Stephanie had pursued him deliberately, finding excuses to see him alone, sending texts and photos when I wasn't around. The scandal spread quickly through our social circle. Some friends sided with me, others with Nathan, citing his influence in the business community. Several admitted they'd noticed flirtation between Nathan and Stephanie, but hadn't wanted to get involved. Their cowardice stung almost as much as the betrayal. Mother became my lifeline during those dark months. She brought food when I couldn't eat, listened to my tearful rants, and stayed overnight when the loneliness became unbearable. She tried repeatedly to mediate between Stephanie and me, inviting us both to family dinners that inevitably ended in tense silence or bitter arguments. During one such dinner, Stephanie snapped after I refused to pass her the salt. "You always got everything first, Rebecca. The grades, the job, the apartment. For once, I got something before you did." "My fiancé wasn't a prize to be won," I replied, my voice shaking. "He was the man I loved and trusted." Mother put her fork down. "Stephanie Marie Thompson, apologize to your sister right now." "For what? Being honest? Nathan chose me. He loves me now." I stood, napkin thrown onto my plate. "I can't do this anymore, Mom. I'm sorry." It was the last family dinner I attended with Stephanie present. Father's heart problems worsened from the stress of his daughter's feud, requiring medication adjustment and additional doctor visits. Mother aged years and months, the lines around her eyes deepening as she tried desperately to hold her family together. 6 months after discovering Nathan and Stephanie's betrayal, I hit rock bottom. My therapist diagnosed me with depression and recommended medication. Work suffered as I struggled to focus, eventually losing a major client after a disastrous presentation where I broke down crying. My boss suggested a leave of absence, but I knew staying in Boston, where memories lurked around every corner, would only prolong my suffering. When a marketing director position opened in our Chicago branch, I applied immediately. The interview went surprisingly well, my desperation for change perhaps reading as enthusiasm. 2 weeks later, I received the offer. Mother helped me pack my apartment, carefully wrapping photos and mementos in tissue paper. As we sorted through my belongings, deciding what to keep and what to donate, she broached the subject that hung between us. "Will you ever consider forgiving Stephanie?" she asked, sealing a box with packing tape. I continued folding sweaters without looking up. "I don't know, Mom. Not now. Maybe not ever." "Forgiveness isn't about them deserving it," she said softly. "It's about freeing yourself." I am freeing myself. I'm moving to Chicago. Mother sat beside me on the bed, taking my hands in hers. "Running away isn't the same as healing, sweetheart." Tears filled my eyes. "I need space to even begin to heal."
Can you understand that?
She nodded, pulling me into a tight hug. "Promise you'll call. Promise you won't shut us out completely." "I promise." Saying goodbye to my parents was harder than I anticipated. Father held me longer than usual, his voice gruff with emotion. "You show them, kiddo. Build a life so good they'll choke on their regret." My first weeks in Chicago were lonely and doubt-filled. My studio apartment felt sterile and unfamiliar. I worked long hours to avoid going home to empty rooms, eating takeout at my desk and falling into bed exhausted each night. Then came the news that twisted the knife deeper. Mother called one Sunday morning, her voice cautious. "Rebecca, I feel you should hear this from me rather than social media. Stephanie and Nathan got married yesterday." The small civil ceremony had been featured in Boston Magazine's society pages. Nathan's business connections ensuring coverage despite the modest scale. The accompanying photo showed them beaming outside the courthouse, Stephanie wearing a simple white dress, my former engagement ring prominently displayed on her finger. That night was my lowest point. I drank an entire bottle of wine alone, scrolled through old photos of Nathan and me, and cried until my eyes swelled shut. I called in sick to work the next day, unable to face the world. But something shifted during those dark hours alone. As morning light filtered through my blinds, I made a decision. This would be the last day I gave them power over my happiness. I deleted all photos of Nathan from my phone, blocked both him and Stephanie on social media, and took a long shower, imagining my pain washing away down the drain. At work, I threw myself into projects with renewed focus. My boss noticed the change, assigning me to more significant clients. I developed a reputation for creativity and dedication, earning respect in my new office. My first real Chicago friend was Madison Reynolds, our HR director, who invited me to join her book club. Through her, I met other women, slowly building a social circle. Madison frequently tried to set me up on dates, but I declined each offer, the thought of romantic vulnerability still terrifying. 4 months into my Chicago life, I was sent to a technology conference in San Francisco to represent our company. On the second evening, I attended a business dinner with potential clients, seated next to Zachary Foster, a tech investor and entrepreneur who had recently relocated from Seattle. Zachary was different from Nathan in every way. Where Nathan had been flashy and charming, Zachary was understated and genuine. His quiet confidence and thoughtful questions drew people in without demanding attention. When he spoke about his work, his passion was evident, but never boastful. He asked for my card after dinner, and I gave it without expectation. To my surprise, he emailed the next morning asking if I'd like to continue our conversation about digital marketing trends over coffee before the day's sessions. Over the next 3 months, Zachary and I maintained professional contact. He referred clients to my agency, and I introduced him to my Chicago business connections. Madison noticed our frequent work lunches and raised an eyebrow. "He likes you, Rebecca. And not just professionally." "We're just colleagues," I insisted. "Colleagues don't look at each other the way he looks at you." Eventually, Zachary asked me to dinner at a restaurant unrelated to work. I panicked, almost canceling twice before forcing myself to go. 20 minutes into the date, discussing our favorite books, I had a full-blown panic attack. My hands shook, breathing became difficult, and tears welled in my eyes. Instead of being embarrassed or annoyed, Zachary moved to sit beside me, speaking calmly until my breathing normalized. He drove me home without pressure or questions. The next day, flowers arrived at my office with a note. "No pressure, no expectations. Just hoping you're feeling better, Zachary." That evening, I called him and shared everything about Nathan and Stephanie. He listened without interruption, then shared his own story of heartbreak from his past marriage that ended when his wife left him for his business partner, taking half their joint company in the divorce. "Broken trust leaves scars," he said. "Anyone worth your time will understand that healing isn't linear." Over the following months, we built a foundation of friendship first. Zachary never pushed for more than I could give, respecting my boundaries while remaining steadfastly present. For our 5th date, he cooked dinner at his apartment instead of taking me to a crowded restaurant that might trigger my anxiety. When panic occasionally resurfaced, he knew exactly how to help me through it. For the first time since Nathan, I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, trust was possible again. 1 year after moving to Chicago, I barely recognized my life. My promotion to senior marketing director came with a corner office overlooking the river. My circle of friends had expanded beyond Madison to include several close confidants. And most surprisingly, I had fallen deeply in love with Zachary. Unlike Nathan's flashy courtship, Zachary's love manifested in consistent, thoughtful ways. He remembered small details, like how I preferred oat milk in my coffee or which true crime podcasts I followed. He respected my independence while offering unwavering support. Most importantly, he never compared me to anyone else or tried to change me. I met Zachary's sister Caroline during her visit from Portland. We connected immediately, exchanging numbers and developing our own friendship independent of Zachary. She told me stories of their childhood in Seattle, painting a picture of the boy who became the man I was growing to love. My relationship with my parents continued from a distance. I called Mother weekly, carefully steering conversations away from Stephanie. Father occasionally joined these calls, his gruff voice softening when telling me how proud he was of my fresh start. I visited twice that year, timing my trips when I knew Stephanie and Nathan would be away. Mother provided occasional updates about them. Their marriage appeared perfect on social media, Stephanie posting photos of luxury vacations and charity galas. According to Mother, they had purchased a large house in Beacon Hill and were renovating extensively. Stephanie asks about you sometimes, Mother mentioned during one call. What do you tell her? I asked, stirring pasta sauce on my stove. That you're doing well, that you're building a new life. Does she ever express regret? Mother sighed. In her way. She gets quiet when your name comes up. My therapy continued in Chicago, my new therapist helping me process the betrayal and build healthier relationship patterns. I learned to recognize my triggers and communicate boundaries effectively. Slowly, the nightmares about Nathan and Stephanie faded. In June, Zachary surprised me with a weekend trip to Michigan's wine country. We stayed at a charming bed and breakfast surrounded by vineyards, spent afternoons wine tasting, and evenings watching the sunset over Lake Michigan. For the first time in years, I felt completely present and happy, without the shadow of past betrayal hanging over me. On our last evening, walking through a garden filled with early summer blooms at the Chicago Botanic Garden, Zachary stopped beneath a trellis covered in climbing roses. Rebecca, he said, taking both my hands in his. This past year, knowing you has been the greatest gift of my life. When he knelt, producing a ring box from his pocket, panic flashed briefly. Images of Nathan's proposal threatened to overshadow this moment. But looking into Zachary's eyes, I saw only sincerity and love. I'm not asking for an answer today, he said, seeming to read my hesitation. I just want you to know that whenever you're ready, whether that's tomorrow or next year, I'll be here. Tears filled my eyes, but not from fear or pain. Yes, I whispered. I'm ready now. The ring was nothing like the ostentatious diamond Nathan had given me. A simple emerald with small diamonds on either side, elegant and understated like our relationship. That night, I called my parents with the news. Mother cried happy tears. He sounds wonderful, darling. When can we meet him? Soon, I promised. Very soon. We planned a small wedding, only 30 guests, at a historic Chicago venue. At Mother's urging, I sent Stephanie an invitation, more as a gesture toward healing than an expectation of attendance. Her response came via email, brief and cold. Congratulations on your engagement. Unfortunately, Nathan and I have prior commitments on that date. Best wishes for your future. Mother was disappointed, but unsurprised. Give her time, Rebecca. This is progress compared to where you both were. Our wedding day arrived, intimate and joyful with my parents, new friends, and Zachary's family in attendance. Father walked me down the aisle, whispering, I haven't seen you this happy in years, kiddo. Zachary's vows acknowledged our journey. Rebecca, I promise to remember that love is both strong and fragile, requiring care and commitment every day. I promise to be worthy of the trust you've given me, knowing how precious and hard-won that gift is. We built our life together in Chicago, buying a brownstone that we renovated together. My career continued advancing, eventually leading to a vice president position. Zachary's investment firm grew, focusing on supporting women-led tech startups. During a dinner with business associates, I learned something that connected past to present. A venture capitalist mentioned working with Nathan years earlier. Reynolds? Yeah, he and Foster had quite the rivalry in the angel investing space about 7 years back. Foster backed the right startup. Reynolds backed the competitor. Foster's pick got acquired for millions. Reynolds went bankrupt. Later that night, I asked Zachary about this connection. I was going to tell you eventually, he admitted. I knew who you were when we met at that conference. Not the details of what happened, but that you had been engaged to Reynolds. Why didn't you say anything? I wanted you to know me for me, not as someone connected to your past. I wasn't angry. Somehow, the cosmic symmetry felt right. 2 years into our marriage, We began trying for a baby. Months passed without success, leading to fertility specialists and difficult conversations. Through disappointments and medical procedures, Zachary remained my rock, holding me through tears and reminding me that family comes in many forms. Then came the devastating call about mother's cancer diagnosis. Zachary and I flew to Boston immediately, meeting with oncologists and helping my parents navigate treatment options. Mother put on a brave face, but the cancer was aggressive and had already spread. I took a leave from work to care for her, moving temporarily back to my childhood home. Zachary flew in every weekend, supporting both me and my increasingly frail father. In her final weeks, Mother and I had precious conversations about life, love, and family. One evening, as I adjusted her pillows, she broached the subject of Stephanie. "I wish you girls could find peace with each other," she said, her voice weak but determined. "Life is too short for such distance between sisters." "I know, Mom," I replied, swallowing back tears. "Promise me you'll try, Rebecca. Not for her, but for yourself. And maybe a little bit for your old mother." I promised, not knowing if I could keep it, but wanting to give her peace. Mother passed peacefully 3 days later, Zachary, father, and I at her bedside. I called Stephanie immediately, the first direct communication we'd had in years. "Mom's gone," I said when she answered. Her sharp intake of breath was the only sound for several seconds. "I'll be there in an hour," she finally replied, her voice breaking. We met at our parents' house, hugging briefly and awkwardly before turning our attention to father and funeral arrangements. The real test would come at the funeral itself, where years of hurt and anger would collide with fresh grief and Mother's final wish. The morning of Mother's funeral dawned gray and drizzly, fitting the somber occasion. I stood before the mirror in my childhood bedroom, adjusting my black dress and wondering how I would survive the day ahead. Zachary appeared behind me, handsome in his dark suit, placing his hands gently on my shoulders. "I'm right beside you today," he said, meeting my eyes in the reflection. "Whatever happens." Downstairs, Father sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at his untouched coffee. The past week had hollowed him out, his tall frame suddenly stooped with grief. At 72, he seemed to have aged a decade since Mother's diagnosis. "Ready, Dad?" I asked softly, touching his shoulder. He nodded, rising slowly. "Eleanor always said funerals aren't for the dead, they're for the living." Never understood that until now. The funeral home was already filling with extended family and friends when we arrived. I stayed close to Father, greeting people with mechanical smiles and accepting condolences from faces I barely recognized. Cousins from California, Mother's college roommate, neighbors from throughout my parents' 40 years in their home. "You look just like Eleanor at your age," my great-aunt Patricia said, patting my cheek. "She would be proud of the woman you've become." "How have you been, dear?" asked my mother's friend Judith. "Eleanor mentioned you moved away. Chicago, was it?" "Yes, almost 5 years now," I replied, not adding that my sister's betrayal had prompted the move. As I guided Father to his seat in the front row, Zachary at his other side, a murmur rippled through the gathering. I turned to see Stephanie and Nathan entering, their appearance causing heads to turn and whispers to spread. Stephanie wore an expensive black dress that highlighted her slender figure, diamond earrings catching the light. Nathan looked uncomfortable in his perfectly tailored suit, his arm around my sister's waist in a show of support. Her left hand rested prominently on her purse, the massive diamond engagement ring and wedding band impossible to miss. Father stiffened beside me. "Thomas, breathe," I whispered, concerned about his heart. They made their way forward, stopping to speak with various attendees. I kept my eyes front, focusing on the large photo of Mother displayed beside her closed casket, her warm smile easing some of my anxiety. Eventually, they reached the front. Stephanie embraced Father, who returned the hug stiffly. Nathan shook his hand, receiving only a curt nod in response. "Rebecca," Stephanie said, turning to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "It's been a long time." "Yes," I replied simply, not trusting myself with more words. Nathan nodded awkwardly. Sorry for your loss. Zachary had stepped away to speak with the funeral director, leaving me momentarily alone with them. Stephanie seized the opportunity. I need to speak with you privately, she said, gesturing toward a side room. Against my better judgment, I followed her, wanting to avoid a scene at Mother's funeral. The small room contained only a few chairs and a box of tissues, clearly designated for mourners needing private moments. Stephanie closed the door behind us. Up close, I noticed fine lines around her eyes that her expensive makeup couldn't quite conceal. You look thin, she remarked, her gaze assessing me critically. Grief does that, I replied flatly. She fiddled with her ring, twisting it around her finger. Nathan and I bought a summer house on Cape Cod last month. 8 bedrooms, private beach access. I remained silent, wondering why she felt compelled to share this information. We're considering starting a family soon, she continued. Nathan's company just acquired 2 startups, and we're renovating the 3rd floor for a nursery. Congratulations, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. Is there something specific you wanted to discuss about the funeral arrangements? Her smile turned sharp. I just thought you might want to know how well we're doing. Poor you still alone at 38. I got the man, the money, and the mansion. The familiar pain flared briefly, then subsided. 6 years ago, her words would have devastated me. Today, they seemed pathetic and desperate. I smiled genuinely. Have you met my husband yet? Her expression faltered. Husband? Zachary. I called, opening the door to find him waiting nearby. Come meet my sister. As Zachary entered the room, Nathan appeared behind him, clearly having been watching our interaction. When the men made eye contact, Nathan's face drained of color. Foster, he said, his confident demeanor cracking. Reynolds. Zachary's tone remained professional but cool. It's been what, 7 years? Not since Macintosh acquired Innotech instead of your client CompuServe, right? Nathan swallowed visibly. You two are married? 2 wonderful years now, I confirmed, slipping my hand into Zachary's. Zachary Foster, Stephanie repeated slowly. As in Foster Investments. The same, Zachary replied. Rebecca and I met at a tech conference in San Francisco. Nathan attempted to recover his composure. Foster, we should catch up sometime. I've been meaning to reach out about potential collaborations. My schedule's quite full, Zachary replied pleasantly but firmly. But you can contact my office if you'd like. The funeral director appeared, informing us the service was about to begin. As we returned to the main room, whispers followed us, the connection between Zachary and Nathan clearly known in business circles. We had just taken our seats when Father clutched his chest, his face contorting in pain. Dad, I cried, as Zachary immediately called for help. We moved Father to a private room, the funeral temporarily delayed. A doctor among the attendees examined him, determining it was likely stress and not another heart attack. Stephanie followed us, genuine concern on her face. Is he okay? Should we call an ambulance? Her voice shook slightly. The doctor says he's stable, I replied, surprised by her sincerity. Just overwhelmed. For 20 tense minutes, we sat together in awkward silence, united only by concern for our father. When he insisted on proceeding with the service, we returned to the main room, the brief crisis creating an unexpected truce. The funeral itself was beautiful and heartbreaking. I delivered a eulogy highlighting Mother's kindness, strength, and unwavering love for her family. When Stephanie rose to speak after me, she faltered after only a few sentences, tears overwhelming her. Without thinking, I moved to her side, placing a supportive hand on her back. It's okay, I whispered. Take your time. She gathered herself, completing her tribute to our mother with stories from our childhood that brought both tears and gentle laughter from the attendees. At the cemetery, rain fell softly as we laid Mother to rest. I noticed Nathan standing apart from the main group, checking his watch repeatedly. Stephanie remained by Father's side, her earlier bravado replaced by genuine grief. The reception at my parents' house was crowded with well-wishers bringing casseroles and sharing memories. Nathan drank heavily, his discomfort evident as several business associates engaged Zachary in animated conversation. I overheard fragments about Nathan's company struggling with recent acquisitions and wondered if Stephanie's boasting had been covering financial troubles. Throughout the day, I maintained the dignity mother would have expected, focusing on supporting father and honoring her memory rather than dwelling on old wounds. As guests began departing, I caught Stephanie watching me from across the room, her expression unreadable but somehow softer than before. The day after the funeral, Zachary needed to return to Chicago for an important board meeting. "Are you sure you'll be okay if I go?" he asked, packing his overnight bag. "I can reschedule." "Dad needs help sorting through Mom's things," I explained. "I should stay a few more days." "I'll be fine." After seeing Zachary off at the airport, I returned to my parents' house to find Father sitting in Mother's garden, a photo album open on his lap. "She labeled everything," he said, showing me Mother's neat handwriting beneath each photo. "Said someday we'd appreciate knowing who was who." That afternoon, I began the painful task of sorting through Mother's closet. Each dress held memories. The blue one from my college graduation, the floral print she wore to Sunday brunches, the elegant gray she'd chosen for my engagement party. I found myself talking to her as I worked, telling her about my life in Chicago, my work, my happiness with Zachary. In her bedside drawer, I discovered a journal bound in soft leather. Inside, Mother had written periodic entries over the past decade. Many mentioned her daughters, her hopes for our reconciliation, her sadness at the rift between us. The final entry, dated just 2 weeks before her death, read, "My greatest regret is leaving with my girls still estranged. Eleanor always fixed things, but I couldn't fix this. I pray they find their way back to each other somehow." The doorbell rang as I wiped away tears. Through the front window, I saw Stephanie standing alone on the porch, no sign of Nathan's car in the driveway. Father had gone to his brother's house for dinner, leaving me to face my sister alone. I opened the door, uncertain what to expect. "Hi," she said simply. "Can I come in?" In the kitchen, I made coffee while Stephanie sat silently at the table. She looked different without Nathan beside her, smaller somehow, less artificially composed. "Where's Nathan?" I finally asked, placing a mug before her. "At home. He doesn't know I'm here." She wrapped her hands around the mug, but didn't drink. I told him I needed space after the funeral. The silence stretched between us, years of unspoken words creating an almost physical barrier. "I'm sorry about yesterday," she finally said. "What I said in that room at the funeral home. It was cruel and completely inappropriate." I nodded, acknowledging her apology, without immediately accepting it. "I saw Mom's journal," she continued. "Dad showed it to me last night. Her last wish was for us to reconcile." "I found it too," I replied. "But reconciliation requires more than just proximity, Stephanie. It needs honesty." She looked up, tears filling her eyes. "You want honesty? Here's honesty."
I'm miserable, Rebecca.
"Have been almost since the beginning." The dam broke then, words pouring out between sobs. Nathan had changed shortly after their wedding, becoming controlling and critical. His business had been struggling for years, each new acquisition an attempt to save a sinking ship. The houses, the cars, the vacations were all leveraged on mounting debt. Their marriage was a carefully constructed facade, maintained for business connections and social standing. "He monitors my spending, checks my phone, questions my every movement," she admitted. "The Nathan you knew doesn't exist anymore. Maybe he never did." "Why stay?" I asked. "Shame," she answered immediately. "How could I admit what I'd done to you, destroyed our family, for something that turned out to be a mirage? And then there's the prenup. I leave with nothing." I pushed Mother's journal across the table. "Read the rest of her entries." As Stephanie read, fresh tears flowed. She looked up eventually, face raw with emotion. She knew. She saw through everything. "Mom always did," I agreed. "I've hated myself for years," Stephanie whispered. "Every time Mom mentioned you, every accomplishment of yours she proudly shared, I felt the weight of what I'd done. I'm planning to leave him, Rebecca. I've been secretly consulting a lawyer. My feelings were complicated, vindication mixed with unexpected compassion. The sister who had caused me such pain was suffering consequences I wouldn't have wished on anyone. I don't expect forgiveness, she continued. I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know the truth before I blow up my life again. We spent the next hours looking through Mother's belongings together, sharing memories both painful and precious. Stephanie recalled Mother teaching us to bake cookies, how she never mixed the separate batches because I liked chocolate chip and Stephanie preferred sugar cookies. Remember how she used to leave notes in our lunchboxes? Stephanie asked, smiling through tears. Different messages every day, I nodded. She never repeated one. We weren't instantly healed, the wounds too deep for immediate closure. But as evening fell, something had shifted between us, Mother's love creating a fragile bridge across years of hurt. What will you do? I asked as Stephanie prepared to leave. File for divorce when my lawyer says the timing is right. Rent a small apartment. Start over. She paused at the door. What about you? Will you go back to Chicago?
Yes. My life is there now.
With Zachary. You seem happy, she said, a statement rather than a question. I am. Truly happy. I'm glad. One of us should be. We hugged briefly, awkwardly, before she left. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. Back in Chicago, I settled into life with Zachary, our brownstone, and my rewarding career. 6 months after Mother's funeral, I discovered I was pregnant after years of trying. The joy was tempered with sadness that Mother wouldn't meet her grandchild, but I felt her presence in quiet moments. Stephanie and I maintained cautious contact through occasional phone calls. She had filed for divorce and moved into a modest apartment, finding work at a small marketing firm. The gossip and judgment she faced in Boston social circles was difficult, but she seemed determined to rebuild authentically. The path that led me here was never one I would have chosen. Losing Nathan had seemed like the end of my world, but it had actually been the beginning of a far better one. With Zachary, I found not just love but partnership, respect, and unwavering support. His success never overshadowed mine but complemented it, each of us growing stronger together. Mother had been right about forgiveness being for ourselves rather than others. The weight of anger and resentment had lifted gradually, allowing me to see my past with clarity and my future with hope. The scars remained, but they no longer defined me. As I sat in our nursery, Zachary painting the walls a soft green, I thought about the lessons I would someday share with our child. How loss can lead to finding. How endings create space for beginnings. How the hardest moments often direct us toward our truest path. My life had become richer and more authentic than I could have imagined during those dark days 6 years ago. Not despite the betrayal, but because of how it forced me to rebuild with greater wisdom and intention. Have you ever experienced a painful loss that eventually led you to something better? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please subscribe and share with someone who might need to hear that pain doesn't get the final word in their story. Thank you for listening. And remember that sometimes the most difficult chapters lead to the most beautiful endings. Leave a comment, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories of resilience and unexpected blessings. I'm Jessica Wright, 28, and I once believed I had it all: a thriving marketing career, a gorgeous fiancé named Ryan, and a dream wedding on the horizon. What I didn't have was a sister I could trust. Amanda had always competed with me, but I never imagined she'd steal my entire life while I was away on business. When I walked into what should have been MY reception and found her wearing MY dress beside MY fiancé, she smirked and said those unforgivable words. Little did they know, I had a secret that would change everything. Before I dive into how my perfect life imploded, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted. The justice in this story might just heal your heart too. Ryan Bennett walked into my life 3 years ago at a charity gala in downtown Boston. I was working the event for my marketing firm, ensuring everything ran smoothly for our client. He was there representing his investment firm, looking impossibly handsome in a tailored suit. Our eyes locked across the room in that cliché way you see in movies, but never believe happens in real life. Yet it did. "You look like you could use this," he said, handing me a glass of champagne after watching me manage a minor crisis with the auction items. "Is it that obvious I'm stressed?" I laughed, accepting the drink gratefully. "No, you're handling everything perfectly. I'm just observant." His smile was warm, confident without being cocky. We talked for hours that night, long after my professional obligations ended. Ryan was intelligent, ambitious, and seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts and dreams. By the end of the evening, we'd exchanged numbers, and he called the very next day. Our relationship progressed quickly but never felt rushed. Within 6 months, we were practically living together, and at the 1-year mark, we made it official, finding a beautiful apartment in Back Bay with a view of the Charles River. Every morning, we'd have coffee on our small balcony, planning our future together. Ryan worked at his investment firm, climbing the corporate ladder impressively fast, while I continued developing marketing campaigns for luxury brands. On our 2nd anniversary, Ryan took me to the lighthouse where we'd had our first official date. As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, he dropped to one knee and presented a platinum ring with an emerald-cut diamond. "Jessica Wright, you've made these past 2 years the best of my life. You challenge me, support me, and make me laugh every single day. I can't imagine my future without you in it. Will you marry me?" I said yes through happy tears, and we spent the evening calling family and close friends to share our joy. My parents, Barbara and George, were thrilled. Dad had always liked Ryan, especially their shared interest in golf and classic cars. Mom immediately started talking about venue options and dress shopping. Then there was Amanda, my younger sister by 2 years. Her congratulations seemed genuine enough on the phone, but I noticed the slight edge in her voice. That was nothing new. Since childhood, Amanda had lived in the shadow of my achievements, or at least that's how she saw it. When I made honor roll, she pushed herself to make high honors. When I was accepted to Boston University, she applied to Harvard, though ended up at Boston College. When I started dating someone, she'd suddenly find interest in them or try to introduce me to someone better. I hoped my engagement might finally put our rivalry to rest. After all, Amanda was 26 now, surely too mature to compete over something as personal as marriage. But within weeks, she'd started dating a surgeon, sending our mother elaborate texts about their expensive dates and potential future together. Despite this undercurrent of tension, wedding planning began in earnest. Ryan and I secured a stunning waterfront venue for June of the following year, giving us plenty of time to plan. I found my dream dress, an elegant A-line gown with delicate lace detailing and a sweetheart neckline that made me feel like royalty. We sent save the dates, selected our wedding party, with Amanda as a bridesmaid, trying to keep the peace, and started dance lessons for our first dance. 8 months before the wedding, my boss called me into her office with an unexpected opportunity. "We need someone to handle the Kingsley account launch in London," she explained. "It's a 2-week assignment, but it could lead to heading up our new international division." "You're my first choice, Jessica." I was flattered, but hesitant. "When would this be?" "Next month." "I know it's not ideal with your wedding planning, but this could be career-defining." When I told Ryan that evening, I expected some disappointment, but instead, he was enthusiastically supportive. "You have to take this, Jess. The wedding planning will wait. This is huge for your career." He wrapped me in a warm embrace. "I'm so proud of you." His support solidified what I already knew. I was marrying the right man. We agreed that he'd handle any urgent wedding matters while I was gone, and my maid of honor, Megan, offered to step in if needed. What I never imagined was that my absence would create the perfect opportunity for the ultimate betrayal, one that would shatter the beautiful life we'd built together. London greeted me with typical English weather, gray skies and a persistent drizzle that seemed to match the growing unease I felt being so far from home. The Kingsley account was even more demanding than anticipated. As a luxury lifestyle brand entering the European market, they needed a complete marketing strategy developed in record time. My days quickly filled with meetings, market research, and creative sessions that often stretched well into the evening. During my first few days abroad, Ryan and I maintained our connection through regular video calls. He'd show me mail that had arrived, ask questions about wedding decisions, and tell me how much he missed me. Each call ended with "I love you" and counting down the days until my return. "How's everything at home?" I asked during our 5th day's call, noticing he seemed slightly distracted. "All good. Just busy at work," Ryan replied, his eyes darting away from the screen momentarily. "Oh, Amanda stopped by to drop off some wedding magazines your mom sent. She offered to help with some of the planning while you're away." I felt a twinge of discomfort. "That's nice of her. But she doesn't need to do that. We've got most things under control, and Megan can help with anything urgent. It's no problem. She's your sister and wants to be involved." His tone was casual, but something felt off. Over the next few days, our calls became shorter and less frequent. Ryan cited work stress and time zone differences as reasons, which made sense logically, but my intuition whispered warnings I couldn't quite articulate. Then I noticed something on social media that intensified my unease. Amanda had posted a photo of my living room with the caption, "Wedding planning session. Can't wait for the big day." The picture showed scattered brochures and what appeared to be my wedding planning binder on the coffee table. What struck me as odd wasn't just Amanda being in our apartment without me, it was that Ryan was clearly there too. His laptop and distinctive coffee mug were visible in the corner of the shot. I texted Ryan immediately, saw Amanda's post. "You guys working on wedding stuff?" His reply came hours later, "Just going through some vendor options. Nothing major. Don't worry about anything here. Focus on your project." The next day, I received a text from Megan that made my stomach knot. "Hey, is everything okay with you and Ryan? Amanda's been at your place a lot. Just checking." I called Megan during my lunch break, trying to keep my voice steady despite the anxiety building inside me. "What do you mean Amanda's been there a lot?" Ryan said she just dropped by once or twice. Megan hesitated. "Well, I live 3 blocks from you, and I've seen her car there almost every evening this week." I thought maybe you asked her to help with something specific. "No," I replied, feeling a cold weight settling in my chest. "I didn't ask her to help with anything." "I'm sure it's nothing," Megan backpedaled, clearly hearing the concern in my voice. "Maybe they're planning a surprise for when you get back." I wanted to believe that explanation, but the sinking feeling persisted. That evening, my mother called to check on my London experience, and what she said only heightened my suspicions. "Amanda and Ryan seem to be getting along so well lately," she commented cheerfully. She mentioned they're finalizing some wedding details together. "It's nice to see you all acting like family already." "What kind of details?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, I'm not sure of the specifics. Something about the venue and catering, I think. Amanda said not to bother you with it while you're working so hard." After the call, I immediately tried reaching Ryan. He didn't answer. I tried again an hour later, and he finally picked up, sounding slightly out of breath. "Hey, sorry I missed your call. I was at the gym." "Ryan, what's going on with Amanda?" "My mom said you two are making wedding decisions without me." "It's nothing major, Jess. Just confirming some details with vendors. Amanda offered to help since she knows you're swamped with work." "But why wouldn't you discuss these things with me first? And why is she at our apartment every night?" Ryan's voice took on a defensive edge. "She's not here every night. And I thought you'd appreciate the help. This promotion is important to you, right? I'm just trying to take some pressure off." Something in his tone didn't sit right, but I was exhausted from a 14-hour workday and couldn't summon the energy for a confrontation. "Just please don't make any big decisions without me, okay?" "Of course not." Get some rest, you sound tired. The call ended without our usual "I love you," a small detail that loomed large in my mind as I tried to sleep that night. My attempts to reach Amanda went straight to voicemail. I left a casual message asking how she was doing, hoping she might volunteer information about her sudden involvement in my wedding planning. She texted back hours later. "Super busy this week. Let's catch up when you're back. Focusing on work like you should be." The dismissive tone and the obvious deflection only intensified my unease. As my London project entered its most critical phase, requiring almost round-the-clock attention, I found myself distracted by the growing certainty that something was very wrong at home. By the end of my first week in London, Ryan had stopped initiating calls, responding to my texts with increasingly brief replies. When we did speak, he seemed hurried and evasive. Once, I distinctly heard Amanda's laugh in the background before he quickly explained she had just stopped by to drop off dinner. My focus on the Kingsley project suffered as my mind constructed increasingly worrying scenarios. Yet each time I confronted my fears directly, logic would intervene. This was Ryan, the man I trusted completely, and Amanda, despite our complicated relationship, was my sister. Surely I was overreacting, letting distance and stress fuel paranoia. But as the second week of my London assignment began, even that rational voice couldn't explain away the growing evidence that something fundamental had shifted in my absence, something that threatened everything I thought was certain in my life. The Kingsley campaign launch was scheduled for Friday, which would mark the end of my 2-week London assignment. However, by Wednesday afternoon, we had miraculously finalized everything ahead of schedule. My team had worked incredibly efficiently, and the client was thrilled with our work. "You've exceeded all our expectations, Jessica," Mr. Kingsley said during our final meeting. "I've already called your boss to sing your praises." My supervisor back in Boston agreed I could return early. "Take Thursday and Friday to travel home and rest," she insisted. "You've earned it." I felt a surge of excitement at the thought of surprising Ryan. Perhaps my early return would clear up whatever strange dynamic had developed in my absence. I booked a flight for the following morning, texting Megan, and only Megan, about my early arrival. "Don't tell Ryan," I wrote. "I want to surprise him." Megan's response was strangely hesitant. "Are you sure that's a good idea? Why wouldn't it be?" I replied, my anxiety spiking. "No reason. Just wondering if he might have planned something for your scheduled return date instead." Her explanation seemed reasonable enough, but it didn't fully dispel my concerns. Nevertheless, I boarded my flight the next morning, the 7-hour journey giving me plenty of time to imagine the joy of reuniting with Ryan and putting my worries to rest. My flight landed at Boston Logan International at 2:30 p.m. local time. I collected my luggage, caught a taxi, and headed straight to our apartment, my heart alternating between excitement and apprehension. When I unlocked the door to our home, I was met with an unusual silence. Ryan should have been at work, so that wasn't surprising, but something felt off. Walking through our living room, I noticed subtle changes. Furniture slightly rearranged, a throw pillow I didn't recognize, a wine glass in the sink with a distinct lipstick stain that wasn't my shade. Most disturbing was the scent lingering in the air, Amanda's distinctive perfume, the expensive French brand she always made sure everyone knew about. It wasn't just a trace suggesting a brief visit, it permeated the space as if she'd been there for hours, perhaps overnight. I went to our bedroom, finding the bed made differently than how Ryan and I typically arranged it. Opening the closet to hang up my coat, I froze. The garment bag containing my wedding dress, which should have been hanging prominently in the center, was gone. With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and saw several unread messages that had arrived during my flight. From my cousin Ellie, "Is everything okay with you and Ryan? Just saw something confusing." From my college friend Taylor, "Call me ASAP. Something weird is happening." And most alarmingly, a photo from Ellie showing Amanda wearing what appeared to be my wedding dress, standing beside Ryan at what looked exactly like the venue we had booked. The timestamp showed the photo was taken just an hour ago. My mind refused to process what I was seeing. There had to be some explanation. Maybe it was a weird rehearsal? A photo shoot for something? But deep down, I knew. I called Ellie with shaking hands. "Jessica." "Oh my God," she answered immediately. "Are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm home." "What's happening? Why is Amanda in my dress at my venue?" There was a long pause. "You don't know?" "Jessica, they're getting married. Today. Right now. Everyone thought you knew, that you'd called off the engagement and Amanda was taking your place." That's what they told everyone. The world tilted beneath me. Without responding, I ended the call, grabbed my car keys, and raced downstairs. I drove to the waterfront venue in a state of shock, running multiple red lights along the way. The valet attendant recognized me as I screeched to a halt outside the venue. "Ms. Wright, I thought you were inside already. Your sister looks just like you in that dress." I pushed past him, rushing through the doors and following the sound of reception music. What I saw stopped me cold, my planned wedding in full swing, but with Amanda as the bride. My carefully selected flowers decorated every table. My chosen band played our first dance song. My hand-picked menu was being served to my invited guests. And there in the center of it all, Amanda and Ryan danced together, her head on his shoulder, wearing my dress altered slightly to fit her frame. The sight was so surreal that for a moment, I wondered if I was hallucinating. People noticed me standing there in my travel clothes, shock evident on my face. Conversations halted. The music played on, but the atmosphere shifted as heads turned toward me. Amanda saw me first. Instead of shame or guilt, her expression showed only momentary surprise before settling into something worse, smugness. She whispered something to Ryan, who turned to look at me, his face paling. I walked toward them, the crowd parting silently around me. "What is this?" My voice came out steadier than I expected. Amanda's grip tightened on Ryan's arm possessively. "Exactly what it looks like, Jess. Life goes on. Plans change. These are my plans. My venue. My dress. My fiancé." Each word felt like glass in my throat. "We're yours," she corrected, her smile never wavering. "Ryan and I realized we were meant to be together while you were gone. We didn't want to waste all these excellent arrangements." I looked at Ryan, waiting for him to contradict her, to say this was some elaborate, cruel joke. He met my gaze briefly before looking away. "I'm sorry, Jessica," he mumbled, not sounding sorry at all. Things just happened." "Things just happened?" I repeated incredulously. "In 2 weeks? You decided to marry my sister in my planned wedding." By now, everyone was watching the unfolding drama. I spotted my parents standing nearby, their expressions a mix of shock and discomfort. They hadn't stopped this. They were participating. "You should probably go," Amanda said, maintaining her composed facade. "You're making a scene. But you can watch from the sidelines if you want. After all, you did plan a beautiful wedding." Something inside me shattered at those words. The callousness, the complete lack of remorse, it was beyond comprehension. I noticed my mother finally moving toward me, but it was too late. I couldn't bear another second in that room, watching my sister live the life she'd stolen from me. I turned and ran, tears blinding me as I pushed through the doors and out into the parking lot. Behind me, I heard a few voices calling my name, but I didn't stop. I got into my car and drove, with no destination in mind, just needing to put distance between myself and the horrifying scene I'd just witnessed. My entire life had just imploded, and I hadn't even seen it coming. I checked into the first hotel I came across, a mid-range chain off the highway. The front desk clerk glanced at my tear-stained face, but professionally avoided comment as I paid for the room with shaking hands. Once inside, I collapsed onto the bed, finally allowing the full impact of what had happened to crash over me. My phone had been buzzing continuously since I fled the wedding venue. I forced myself to look at the screen, 23 missed calls and dozens of texts. Some were from concerned friends who had witnessed the confrontation. Others were from family members, including 3 from my mother. None were from Ryan or Amanda. One text from Megan stood out. "I'm so sorry, Jess. I suspected something but had no proof. Tell me where you are. You shouldn't be alone right now." I hesitated before responding with my location. Within 40 minutes, there was a knock at my door. Megan stood there holding a bag from the liquor store and another containing ice cream. "I didn't know which would help more," she said softly, "so I brought both." We sat on the hotel bed, passing a pint of chocolate ice cream between us as I tried to make sense of what had happened. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. I said, my voice hollow, that there had to be an explanation for why they were spending so much time together. Megan's expression was pained. "I started noticing things about 2 or 3 days after you left. Amanda's car at your place at odd hours, them together at restaurants. But it seemed so outlandish, the idea that your sister and fiancé would." She trailed off. Did everyone know except me? The question that had been burning inside me. "No," Megan said firmly. "Most people at the wedding today seemed confused. The story they told was that you had called things off with Ryan because of some job opportunity in London, and that you had given them your blessing to use the venue and arrangements since everything was already paid for." The calculated nature of their deception made me physically ill. And my parents? They were there. They didn't stop it. Megan hesitated. "From what I gathered, they were told this was what you wanted. That you and Amanda had worked things out between you. Your mom looked pretty shocked when you showed up." The following days passed in a blur of grief and logistics. I couldn't return to the apartment I'd shared with Ryan, not only because I couldn't bear to be there, but because legally it was his name on the lease. I extended my hotel stay while looking for a new place to live. The Monday after the wedding, my phone rang with a call from my mother. After 3 days of silence, I finally answered. "Jessica, please come home. We need to talk about this." "Talk about what, Mom?" "How you watched Amanda marry Ryan without even calling to check if your other daughter was okay with it. We thought you knew. Amanda showed us texts from you saying you were staying in London for a job and didn't want the wedding anymore. She said you told her she could have the venue since it was paid for. And you believe that?" Without talking to me directly. My voice cracked. "Did you even try to call me?" The silence told me everything. They hadn't tried hard enough. They had accepted the convenient story that caused the least disruption. "We're so sorry, Jessica. We had no idea." But sorry couldn't undo what had happened. Sorry couldn't erase the images burned into my mind. Amanda in my dress, Ryan holding her the way he used to hold me, my carefully planned wedding becoming the backdrop for their betrayal. A week after returning from London, I met with Megan for coffee. She had been collecting information from mutual friends, trying to piece together the timeline of Amanda and Ryan's deception. "From what I can gather, it started about 3 months ago," she explained gently. "Long before your London trip. Taylor saw them having lunch together at that cafe near Ryan's office. They claimed it was about planning your birthday surprise. 3 months? We were actively planning our wedding then. I was with him every day. How could he?" "There's more," Megan said hesitantly. "Rebecca from your office said she saw them at the Harborview Hotel one night, going into an elevator together." Each new revelation was another knife to my heart. The betrayal wasn't just about the wedding day. It had been ongoing, deliberate, planned. While I was excitedly planning our future, Ryan had been building a different one with my sister. I learned they had systematically used all my wedding deposits and arrangements. They had contacted my vendors, using Amanda's access to my wedding planning email, which I had shared with her months earlier when she'd offered to help with minor tasks. They had sent updated invitations to guests, explaining the change in bride, with their fabricated story about my sudden career move to London. The promotion I had been so excited about, the one Ryan had so enthusiastically encouraged me to pursue, now seemed like convenient timing they had exploited. Despite the success of the Kingsley campaign, I took a leave of absence from work. I couldn't concentrate, couldn't bring myself to care about marketing strategies and brand positioning when my personal life had been so thoroughly destroyed. I found a small studio apartment across town and furnished it sparsely with essentials. Each night, I would lie awake replaying moments from my relationship with Ryan, searching for signs I had missed, red flags I had ignored. Each memory was now tainted, suspect. Had he ever truly loved me? Or had I just been a placeholder until someone better came along? The worst part was the isolation. Many mutual friends felt caught in the middle and kept their distance. Some believed the lies Ryan and Amanda had told. Others simply didn't know what to say in the face of such a betrayal. My parents tried repeatedly to reach out, but I maintained minimal contact. Their failure to verify such an outlandish story before participating in that wedding felt like its own betrayal. 1 month after the wedding, I hit my lowest point. I had lost weight, wasn't sleeping, and could barely function. My new apartment still had unpacked boxes scattered about, as if setting up a real home would somehow make this new reality permanent. That evening, sitting on my bare mattress with no energy even to cry anymore, I wondered if I would ever recover from this. Everything I had believed about my life, my future, my relationships, had been proven false. The career success I had achieved in London felt meaningless compared to the personal devastation I was experiencing. I had trusted completely and been betrayed absolutely. And I had no idea how to move forward from that. Exactly 3 weeks and 2 days after what I now referred to as the incident, an unexpected envelope arrived at my new apartment. The return address belonged to David Cooper, Ryan's former roommate from his early days at the investment firm. We had met a few times at company events, but I wouldn't have called us friends. Inside the envelope was a handwritten note and a USB drive. "Jessica, I've been trying to find you since I heard what happened. What Ryan and your sister did was unforgivable, but there's more you should know. I've been collecting these over the past 6 months because something fell off. I'm sorry I didn't show you sooner. David." With shaking hands, I plugged the USB drive into my laptop. It contained hundreds of screenshots, text messages between Ryan and Amanda dating back almost a year, emails they had exchanged, photos of them together at times when Ryan had told me he was working late or on business trips. Their affair had started long before my London assignment, almost 3 months after our engagement. But as shocking as that revelation was, it wasn't the most disturbing information on the drive. Among the screenshots were email exchanges between Ryan and someone named Marcus at his firm, discussing ways to adjust client accounts and reallocate funds. There were spreadsheets showing unusual transfers, bank statements with highlighted transactions, and notes about covering tracks. Ryan had been embezzling from his company. Further digging revealed evidence of massive gambling debts Ryan had accumulated, online poker, sports betting, casino losses. He had been using the embezzled money to cover these debts while maintaining our lifestyle. Several text exchanges between Ryan and Amanda explicitly discussed my excellent credit score and how Ryan planned to use it to secure loans once we were married. There were also references to the inheritance I had received after my grandmother passed away the previous year, money I had placed in a separate account for our future children's education. "Once we're married, I'll have access to her accounts. We can solve both our problems," Ryan had written to Amanda. "But what about after the wedding? Won't she notice money missing?" Amanda had replied, "Not if we're careful. Besides, with her workload, she barely checks her statements. We just need to get through the wedding first." As I read through more messages, the nature of their relationship became clear. Ryan had initially approached Amanda as an accomplice, using her jealousy of me as leverage to gain her help in accessing my finances. But somewhere along the line, their conspiracy had evolved into an affair. Another screenshot showed Amanda writing, "What if we didn't have to hide? What if I didn't have to be the secret side piece anymore?" Ryan's reply, "You know I can't leave her yet. Not until I have access to the inheritance. The timing of my London trip had presented them with an unexpected opportunity to accelerate their plan. With me out of the country and focused on work, they had seized the chance to take everything, not just my fiancé, but my wedding, my dress, my carefully laid plans. I sat staring at my screen, emotions churning inside me. The pain of their betrayal was still acute, but now it was joined by something else. Cold, clarifying anger. This hadn't just been a case of two people falling for each other behind my back. This had been calculated, predatory, aimed at exploiting me financially. My first instinct was to call the police immediately, to expose Ryan's fraud and Amanda's complicity, to watch their newly minted marriage crumble under the weight of criminal charges. But as the initial surge of rage subsided, I realized that rushing into action might not be the wisest move. I called Stephanie Miller, a lawyer friend from college who specialized in financial crimes. "This is extensive," she said after I forwarded her the files. "But I need to warn you, if you go to the authorities right now, things could get complicated. Ryan could claim these documents were obtained illegally. He could delete evidence, cover his tracks. So what do I do?" I asked, frustration evident in my voice. "If you want justice, real justice, you need more. More evidence, more documentation. This is a good start, but you need an airtight case." She paused. "And Jessica? Be careful. People who commit financial fraud and manipulate others this way, they're dangerous when cornered." That night, I couldn't sleep. But unlike the insomnia of previous weeks, which had been marked by anguish and grief, this sleeplessness had purpose. I was formulating a plan. The next morning, I contacted David Cooper, thanking him for the information and asking if we could meet. Over coffee at a quiet cafe far from our usual haunts, he filled in more details. "I noticed discrepancies in some accounts I was helping Ryan with about 6 months ago," David explained. When I questioned him, he brushed it off as administrative errors. But then I saw the same pattern repeating. "Around the same time, he started mentioning your sister a lot. Why didn't you say anything?" I couldn't keep the accusation from my voice. David looked down, ashamed. I was gathering proof. Going to management with half-baked suspicions against a rising star like Ryan would have ended my career, not his. By the time I had enough evidence to be confident, "You were in London and they were." He trailed off. "Getting married in my wedding," I finished flatly. "I'm sorry, Jessica. I should have found a way to warn you." Despite my initial anger, I could understand David's position. Corporate politics and self-preservation were powerful motivators. At least he had come forward now. That evening, I called Megan and shared everything I had learned. "So it wasn't just about them falling for each other," she said, clearly disgusted. "This was about money the whole time. And not just any money, my money. My inheritance, my credit, my financial stability." The realization made me feel physically ill. I thought I knew Ryan. I thought I knew my own sister. How could I have been so blind? "You weren't blind, Jess. You were trusting. There's a difference." Megan's voice was gentle but firm. "So, what are you going to do now?" The question hung in the air between us. A week ago, I might have said nothing, might have chosen to withdraw, lick my wounds, and try to forget. But now, with this new knowledge, something had shifted inside me. "I'm going to get justice," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Not revenge, justice. For myself and for everyone else they've hurt with their schemes." This secret, the evidence of their financial crimes, wasn't just painful knowledge. It was power. It was a path forward. It was the key to ensuring that what they had done to me wouldn't simply be brushed aside as romantic drama. For the first time since walking into that wedding reception, I felt something other than despair. I felt purpose. I felt control returning. And with it came the first faint stirring of something I had thought was lost forever: hope. My marketing career had taught me valuable lessons about strategy, messaging, and the power of perception. Now, I would apply those skills to the most important campaign of my life. The first step was establishing a facade. If Ryan and Amanda suspected I knew about their financial crimes, they would immediately cover their tracks. I needed them to believe I was merely a heartbroken ex, too devastated by their betrayal to pose any threat. It wasn't difficult to appear devastated. I was. But beneath the genuine grief, a plan was taking shape. I returned to work, explaining my absence as personal issues that were now being addressed. My boss, impressed by the success of the Kingsley campaign, welcomed me back warmly and offered me the international division position we had discussed before my London trip. "Are you sure you're ready?" she asked, concern evident in her expression. Word of my public humiliation had spread through office gossip. "I need this," I replied honestly. "I need to focus on something other than my personal life right now." The promotion came with a significant salary increase and, more importantly, a reason to appear too busy and preoccupied to pursue any questions about Ryan's financial activities. My next step was connecting with David more regularly. As Ryan's colleague, he had access to information I couldn't obtain directly. We established a secure communication system using encrypted messaging apps to share updates. "Ryan's getting sloppy," David reported 2 weeks into our arrangement. "He seems stressed, taking more risks with the accounts." "Keep documenting everything," I instructed. "But don't draw attention to yourself." Meanwhile, I reached out to the security team at Ryan's firm through an anonymous tip line they maintained for whistleblowers. I provided just enough information to raise red flags without revealing everything we knew. This ensured the firm would begin its own quiet investigation, creating another layer of evidence collection independent from my efforts. I maintained minimal contact with my family, responding to texts with brief, non-committal messages that revealed nothing about my emotional state or my growing knowledge. When my mother persisted in trying to arrange a reconciliation, I finally agreed to a brief phone call. "Amanda feels terrible about how everything happened," she claimed, though her tone lacked conviction. "I'm sure she does," I replied neutrally, giving her nothing to report back. "She and Ryan want to clear the air. Maybe we could all have dinner together when things are less raw." The suggestion was so absurd that I almost laughed. "I don't think that will be possible, Mom. I'm focusing on my career right now." The London project led to a promotion. That's wonderful, Jessica." Her surprise was evident. She had expected me to be falling apart, not advancing professionally. "Yes, it is. I need to go now. Conference call with our European office." These brief, controlled interactions served their purpose. Through my parents, Amanda and Ryan would hear that I was withdrawing, focusing on work, showing no signs of suspicion about their deeper schemes. 3 months after the incident, I received my first direct contact from Amanda. A text message, deceptively casual. "Hey Jess, I know things are weird between us, but I've been thinking about you. Maybe we could grab coffee sometime? Just to talk." I waited a full day before responding. "I don't think I'm ready for that yet." Her reply came quickly. "I understand. Just know I'm here when you are ready." The fake concern made my stomach turn, but I recognized it for what it was, not remorse, but reconnaissance. She wanted to gauge my state of mind, to ensure I remained the wounded victim rather than a potential threat. A week later, Ryan reached out via email. "Jessica, I hope this finds you well. There are some financial documents I need that may still be in your possession. Tax forms from last year and some investment statements. Could you check if you have these? It would help us both with the untangling process." The email confirmed what David had already told me. Ryan was trying to cover his tracks, looking for documents that might reveal his schemes. I responded briefly, "I'll look through my files this weekend." This began a careful dance. I would find some of the requested documents, the innocuous ones, and take my time delivering them. Each interaction was an opportunity to present the image of someone slowly recovering, still hurt but beginning to move on, and most importantly, completely unaware of any financial impropriety. Meanwhile, the evidence against them continued to mount. David provided screenshots of increasingly panicked messages between Ryan and various bookkeepers at the firm. The security team's investigation, though still quiet, was progressing. I could tell from the specific types of documentation requests coming through official channels. Most revealing were the signs of trouble in the newlyweds' relationship. David reported overhearing arguments. Amanda began posting cryptic social media messages about trust and honesty, ironic, given her actions, but telling nonetheless. For months after their wedding, Megan spotted them having a heated argument at a restaurant. Amanda looked furious, she reported. I couldn't hear everything, but she definitely said something about money going missing. Ryan kept trying to quiet her down. The honeymoon period had ended quickly. As Ryan's financial schemes became more desperate, he was clearly dipping into funds Amanda thought were earmarked for their future. Through mutual friends, I learned they had postponed their planned honeymoon to the Maldives due to unexpected expenses. Ryan had also been passed over for a promotion he had been confident about receiving. The noose was tightening, but I remained patient, continuing to build my case methodically. I focused equally on rebuilding my life. The international division role challenged me professionally, demanding long hours that helped keep my mind occupied. I moved from my temporary studio to a proper one-bedroom apartment in a new neighborhood, deliberately choosing a building with excellent security. I started therapy, finding genuine healing in processing not just the betrayal, but the patterns in my relationship with Amanda that had led to this point. I joined a kickboxing class, finding unexpected satisfaction in the physical release it provided. 6 months after the incident, I received another text from Amanda. This one lacked the false warmth of her previous message. We need to talk about some financial matters involving Ryan's investments. It's important. I recognized the urgency behind her words. Things were unraveling for them, and she was looking for someone to blame or perhaps a way out. I replied simply, I'm traveling for work this week. Perhaps next week. The delay was strategic. According to David, the firm's internal investigation was nearing completion, and they were preparing to involve external authorities. 7 months after returning from London to find my life stolen, I met with the head of security at Ryan's firm, alongside representatives from their legal department and a detective from the Financial Crimes Division of the Boston Police Department. I brought Stephanie with me as my legal counsel. We've been building this case for months, the security director explained. But your documentation fills in crucial gaps. May I ask why you waited to come forward with this information? Stephanie answered for me. My client needed to ensure her own safety and security before exposing such significant crimes. Given the personal relationship involved, there were complex considerations. The detective nodded sympathetically. We understand, Ms. Wright. Unfortunately, we see this pattern often, financial crimes intertwined with personal relationships. I provided my official statement, turning over all the evidence we had accumulated. The timeline I had constructed showed clearly how Ryan had embezzled approximately $1.2 million over 2 years, using various accounts to hide the money trail. The evidence also demonstrated Amanda's knowledge of and participation in the scheme, particularly in the latter months, when she had actively helped Ryan access my personal financial information. As I left the meeting, the detective assured me, we'll handle this discreetly until we're ready to make arrests. Your safety is a priority. For the first time in months, I felt a weight lifting. Justice was in motion, no longer just a distant hope, but an approaching reality. 2 days later, I received a desperate call from Amanda. Jessica, I need to see you. Now. It's an emergency. What kind of emergency? I kept my voice neutral. I can't discuss it over the phone. Please, just meet me. For coffee. In public. I agreed to meet at a cafe near my office, a busy place where I felt safe. When Amanda arrived, the transformation in her appearance shocked me. Her typically immaculate presentation was disheveled, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Ryan's been lying to me, she blurted before even sitting down fully. About everything. The money, his job, all of it. I maintained my carefully constructed facade. What are you talking about? He's in trouble, Jess. Big trouble. And I think he's been using me. Using us both. Her voice cracked, her eyes filling with tears that seemed remarkably genuine. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Why are you telling me this? I asked coolly. Because I don't know what to do. And because... She hesitated. Because I owe you an apology. What we did to you is unforgivable. I see that now. Too little, too late. Her remorse came not from genuine regret for hurting me, but from the realization that she had been conned by the same man she had helped con me. What exactly is Ryan in trouble for? I asked, pretending ignorance. Amanda leaned forward, lowering her voice. He's been taking money from his clients, gambling it away, using company funds, and now it's all falling apart. There's an investigation. He's talking about leaving the country. I raised my eyebrows in feigned surprise. That sounds serious. It is. And I think I might be implicated too. Her voice trembled. I didn't know at first, I swear. But then I did know, and I still went along with it, and now. She broke down crying. I watched her, feeling nothing but a cold clarity. This was the moment I had been working toward, Amanda revealing her own guilt, coming to me not out of sisterly love, but desperate self-preservation. What do you want from me, Amanda? I asked directly. She looked up, hope flickering in her tear-filled eyes. Help me, please. You always know what to do in a crisis. You're smarter than both of us. There must be a way out of this. There is, I said, my voice steady. The truth. Her face fell. What do you mean? I mean confessing, taking responsibility, facing the consequences. I can't go to prison, she whispered, horrified. That might not be in your control anymore. As I spoke those words, I noticed movement at the cafe entrance. The detective I had met with earlier entered, accompanied by 2 uniformed officers. They spotted us immediately. Amanda, following my gaze, turned and saw them approaching. Her face drained of color as understanding dawned. You knew, she whispered, turning back to me. You've known all along. I met her eyes steadily. Yes, I've known for months. About everything. The affair, the fraud, the plans to use my inheritance and credit. You set me up. This meeting was your idea, I reminded her. I just didn't discourage it. The officers reached our table. Amanda Wright, the detective said formally. We need you to come with us for questioning regarding an ongoing financial crimes investigation. As they led my sister away, she looked back at me one last time, her expression a mixture of shock, betrayal, and something else, perhaps a glimmer of respect for the sister she had always underestimated. I remained seated, watching through the window as they placed her in the police car. Another car pulled up, and I saw Ryan being similarly escorted from his office building across the street. The carefully orchestrated trap had closed perfectly. My secret, the knowledge I had been gathering while they thought I was merely nursing my wounds, had indeed changed everything. The arrest of Ryan Bennett and Amanda Wright made headlines in Boston's financial district. Investment manager and accomplice charged in million-dollar fraud scheme, read the Boston Globe. The articles mentioned the personal connection, that Amanda was the sister of Ryan's former fiancé, but focused primarily on the financial crimes, sparing me the worst of the public spectacle. Ryan was held without bail due to flight risk concerns. Amanda, facing lesser charges, but still serious ones, managed to post bail after 3 days in custody. My parents, finally understanding the full scope of what had happened, were devastated. We had no idea, my father said when he called me after Amanda's arraignment. Jessica, if we had known any of this. But you didn't ask, I replied, the months of hurt still evident in my voice. You saw what you wanted to see. You're right, he admitted, his voice breaking. "We failed you. Completely." That acknowledgement meant more than I had expected. It didn't erase the pain of their choices, but it opened a door that I had thought permanently closed. 2 weeks after the arrests, I received a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Jessica?" It was Amanda, her voice small and unfamiliar. "Please don't hang up." I remained silent, waiting. "I'm calling because I need to say this directly, not through lawyers or mom and dad." She took a shaky breath. "I'm guilty. Of everything. The affair, the wedding, the fraud. All of it." "I know," I replied simply. "I've accepted a plea deal. I'm going to testify against Ryan. About all of it. How he approached me initially about helping him access your finances, how it evolved into us." She paused. "I'm going to serve time, Jessica. Not as much as Ryan will, but enough." I hadn't expected this level of accountability from her. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to know I'm not fighting it. I'm not making excuses. What we did to you, was unforgivable. I don't expect your forgiveness. I just want you to know that I finally understand what I've done." The conversation was brief, but it marked a turning point. Not in our relationship. That would require years of work and might never fully recover, but in my own healing process. Hearing Amanda take responsibility without deflection or justification allowed me to begin releasing some of the anger I had carried. Ryan, in contrast, maintained his innocence despite overwhelming evidence. He claimed Amanda had masterminded everything, using her access to my personal information to facilitate the fraud without his knowledge. It was a desperate, transparent lie that fell apart under scrutiny. The financial records clearly showed his activities predated his involvement with Amanda. 6 months after their arrests, I testified at Ryan's trial. Walking into that courtroom, feeling his eyes on me as I took the stand, was one of the hardest things I had ever done. But I spoke clearly and confidently, detailing the relationship timeline, the London trip, and the discovery of their scheme. "Ms. Wright," Ryan's defense attorney asked during cross-examination, "isn't it possible that your testimony is colored by personal resentment over your fiancé leaving you for your sister?" I met his gaze steadily. "My testimony is based on documented evidence, not emotion. The financial records, text messages, and emails speak for themselves. My personal feelings about their relationship are irrelevant to the fact that Mr. Bennett stole over $1 million from his clients and attempted to access my inheritance fraudulently." The jury found Ryan guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Amanda, through her plea agreement, received 18 months in a minimum security facility, plus 5 years of probation and restitution payments. After the sentencing, my mother reached out again, asking if we could meet. We arranged to have lunch at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant halfway between my apartment and their home. "We've been seeing a family therapist," she told me as we awkwardly navigated our first face-to-face conversation in nearly a year. Trying to understand how we could have been so blind about Amanda. About everything. "And?" I prompted when she fell silent. "And we've realized we've been enabling her behavior her entire life. Making excuses. Accepting her version of events without question." She reached across the table, not quite touching my hand, but extending the gesture. "We failed you, Jessica. Not just with the wedding, but for years before that. We're trying to do better." It wasn't an instant reconciliation. The damage was too deep for that. But it was a beginning, an acknowledgement of the truth and a commitment to change. We agreed to move forward slowly, with clear boundaries and expectations. As for me, the professional success that had begun with the London project continued to flourish. My international division was expanding, and I was traveling regularly to European capitals, building a reputation as a marketing strategist who could navigate cross-cultural challenges effortlessly. During a conference in Chicago, I met Michael Donovan, an architect specializing in sustainable urban development. Our conversation started professionally. His firm was considering rebranding, but quickly evolved into something more personal. His intelligence and quiet confidence attracted me, but what struck me most was his transparency. After dinner, when he suggested seeing each other again, he handed me his card. "Look me up," he said with a gentle smile. "Check my references. I have nothing to hide." The gesture, understanding my caution after everything I'd been through, meant more than elaborate promises or romantic gestures could have. Our relationship developed slowly and deliberately. I was guarded at first, watching for red flags, analyzing his words and actions for inconsistencies. But Michael was patient, never pushing for more than I was ready to give. 6 months into dating, when he suggested meeting his parents during their visit to Boston, I realized I was finally ready to trust again, not blindly, but thoughtfully. A year after Ryan's sentencing, Amanda was released from prison. She moved in with our parents temporarily, enrolled in community college courses, and began her mandated community service. We exchanged occasional texts, surface-level communication that acknowledged our shared history without pretending the wounds had healed. "I'm working on myself," she wrote in one message. Really working, not just saying it. "I'm glad," I replied, and meant it. Her path to redemption would be long and difficult, but I no longer needed to stand in her way or have her in mine. The inheritance that Ryan had targeted remained safely invested, growing steadily for the future. The wedding deposits I had lost were eventually recovered through the legal proceedings, though I donated the money to a nonprofit supporting victims of financial crimes. 2 years after the incident, I stood once again at the lighthouse where Ryan had proposed, this time alone by choice. I watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, reflecting on how dramatically my life had changed since that earlier visit. The betrayal had nearly destroyed me. The pain had been real and devastating. But in confronting it, in refusing to remain a passive victim, I had discovered strengths I hadn't known I possessed. Strategic thinking, resilience, the courage to stand up for justice, even when it meant confronting those closest to me. I had lost a fiancé who had never truly loved me and a sister who had been consumed by jealousy and resentment. But I had gained something more valuable, self-knowledge and the unshakable certainty that I could survive whatever life threw at me. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared below the horizon, I turned away from the lighthouse and walked back to my car, where Michael waited patiently. We had dinner reservations at a new restaurant in town and plans to browse apartment listings afterward, considering the possibility of moving in together. Life hadn't turned out as I had once planned. It had turned out better, more authentic, more honest, built on a foundation of hard-won wisdom rather than fairy tale expectations. Sometimes losing what you thought you wanted opens the door to what you truly need. Sometimes betrayal, painful as it is, reveals truths that blind trust would never uncover. And sometimes, the most powerful secret you can possess is the knowledge of your own strength. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever experienced betrayal or had to rebuild your life after everything fell apart, I'd love to hear about your journey in the comments. How did you find the strength to move forward? What lessons did you learn along the way? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories of resilience and transformation. Remember, your worst moments don't define you. How you respond to them does. My name is Heather. I'm 34 years old, and last Thanksgiving, my parents broke my heart. After 2 years of minimal contact, I thought our family reunion would heal old wounds. Instead, when my children and I arrived, we found 12 perfectly arranged place settings at the table, none for us. As my 8-year-old daughter Emma clutched my hand and 6-year-old Noah asked why we were still standing, I made a decision that would change everything. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever had to stand up to family who treated you like you didn't exist. Growing up, I was the quintessential golden child in my family. My parents, Robert and Nancy had high expectations that I diligently met. I graduated at the top of my class, secured a scholarship to a prestigious university, and landed a promising job at a marketing firm in Chicago right after graduation. My parents proudly displayed my achievements to friends and family like trophies. Our Heather, they'd say, always makes the right decisions. That narrative began to crack when I met Brandon during my second year at the firm. He was charming, creative, and worked in graphic design, a field my status-conscious parents considered unstable. When I brought him home to meet them during Christmas, my father's handshake was firm but brief, and my mother's smile never quite reached her eyes. "He seems nice," my mother said afterward, her tone suggesting the opposite. "But is he really going anywhere with that art career?" Despite their reservations, Brandon and I fell deeply in love. We married after 18 months of dating in a modest ceremony, a far cry from the extravagant wedding my parents had envisioned for me. They attended, of course, but their congratulations felt perfunctory. My father's toast focused more on my accomplishments than our union. When I became pregnant with Emma a year later, my parents softened somewhat. The prospect of grandchildren appealed to them, especially since my younger brother Thomas wasn't settling down anytime soon. They bought us expensive baby furniture and offered advice, sometimes welcome, often not. "You should really consider moving to a better school district before she's born," my mother suggested, knowing full well we couldn't afford it on our combined salaries. Noah came 2 years after Emma. By then, the cracks in my marriage had begun to show. Brandon worked long hours trying to establish his freelance business, while I juggled a reduced schedule at the marketing firm with caring for Emma. The financial strain and sleep deprivation took their toll on our relationship. My parents noticed the tension during family gatherings and didn't hesitate to point it out. "This is what happens when you rush into marriage," my father commented after witnessing a terse exchange between Brandon and me at Noah's first birthday party. When Brandon and I separated 3 years ago, my parents didn't even attempt to hide their "I told you so" attitudes. What hurt most was how they framed our divorce as my failure, my poor judgment in choosing Brandon, my inability to make the marriage work. "You could have had anyone," Heather, my mother, sighed during one particularly painful conversation. "A doctor, a lawyer, someone stable." The divorce hit me hard financially. I took on a second job teaching evening marketing classes at a community college to supplement my income. My apartment with the kids was small but comfortable, located in a decent neighborhood with good schools. Brandon paid child support when he could, but his design business was still inconsistent. My parents offered financial help exactly once, with conditions attached. "We could help you with a down payment on a house in our neighborhood," my father proposed. "It would be better for the children to grow up near us." Their neighborhood was an hour away from my workplace and the kids' school. The implication was clear: if they helped me, I'd have to rearrange my entire life according to their preferences. I declined. For the past 3 years, family gatherings had been tense affairs. My parents doted on my brother Thomas's accomplishments while questioning my parenting decisions in front of everyone. They bought lavish gifts for my children, but delivered them with backhanded comments. "I thought Emma should have something nice to wear," my mother would say, handing my daughter an expensive dress. "I wasn't sure if you could afford proper clothes these days." Despite everything, I kept trying. I called them weekly. I sent photos of the kids. I invited them to school performances and sports games, which they occasionally attended. I believed family was worth fighting for, and I wanted my children to have grandparents in their lives. Last year, we spent Thanksgiving separately. My parents traveled to Florida to visit distant relatives, while the kids and I had a small celebration at home with a few friends. This year would be different. 2 months before Thanksgiving, my mother called to invite us to their house. "We're having everyone over," she said. "Thomas will be there with his new girlfriend, Aunt Judith and Uncle Philip, Cousin Rebecca and her husband and kids. It would be nice if you and the children came too." It wasn't the warmest invitation, but it felt like an olive branch. For weeks, I prepared the kids for the reunion. We talked about being on our best behavior. Emma practiced a Thanksgiving poem she wanted to recite for everyone. Noah drew pictures of turkeys for each family member. I spent hours making my grandmother's famous pumpkin pie from scratch, a peace offering of sorts. The morning of Thanksgiving, I dressed the kids in their nicest outfits. Emma wore a burgundy dress with a matching headband, while Noah looked adorable in khaki pants and a sweater vest. "You both look perfect," I told them, snapping photos in our living room. "Grandma and Grandpa will be so happy to see you." The drive to my parents' suburban home took 45 minutes. As we pulled into their circular driveway, my stomach tightened with familiar anxiety. Several cars were already parked outside. We weren't the first to arrive, but certainly not the last. "Remember, best behavior," I reminded the kids as we walked up the path, balancing the pumpkin pie in one hand and a bag of small gifts in the other. My mother answered the door wearing an elegant cream-colored blouse and pearls. Her smile was polite but reserved. "You're here," she said, stepping aside to let us in. "Everyone's in the living room. No hug. No, you look lovely," or "I've missed you." Just "you're here," as if confirming a delivery rather than greeting her daughter and grandchildren. Little did I know that this cold reception was just the beginning of what would become the most humiliating family gathering of my life. The entryway to my parents' house was festooned with autumn decorations, a tasteful wreath of dried leaves and berries on the door, miniature pumpkins lining the console table, and the familiar scent of cinnamon and cloves wafting from somewhere deeper in the house. Everything was picture perfect, as always in my mother's domain. "Can I help with anything?" I asked, following her toward the kitchen. "No need," she replied without turning around. "Patricia helped me prepare everything yesterday." Patricia was my aunt, my father's sister, who had always been my mother's favorite in-law. The dismissal stung slightly, but I pushed the feeling aside. Today was about new beginnings. In the spacious living room, family members were clustered in conversation groups. My brother Thomas stood by the fireplace with his arm around a willowy blonde woman I assumed was his new girlfriend. Aunt Judith and Uncle Philip occupied the love seat, while my cousins Rebecca and her husband David chatted with my father near the bay window. Their children played with building blocks on the carpet alongside two other kids I recognized as my cousin Michael's. "Look who's here," my father announced, his voice carrying the same forced enthusiasm he used at his corporate events. A chorus of hellos followed, some warmer than others. Thomas approached and gave me a brief hug before bending down to greet Emma and Noah. "Hey, squirts," he said, ruffling Noah's carefully combed hair. "You've grown about a foot since I last saw you." "I learned a poem," Emma said eagerly, looking up at her uncle. "Cool," Thomas replied absently, already straightening up. "Oh, let me introduce you to Melissa." The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of superficial conversations. I noticed my mother disappearing frequently to the kitchen, emerging occasionally to refill drinks or rearrange appetizers on the coffee table. Not once did she ask if we wanted anything to drink or eat, though she made a point of asking everyone else. Noah tugged at my sleeve after a while. "Mom, I'm thirsty," he whispered. "Let's find you some water," I said, leading him toward the kitchen. Inside, my mother was arranging sliced vegetables on a serving platter. The countertops were covered with dishes in various stages of preparation, and the air was thick with the aroma of roasting turkey. "Mom, could Noah have some water, please?" I asked. She glanced up briefly. "Glasses are in the usual cabinet. The filtered water is in the refrigerator." I helped Noah with his drink, feeling like a guest rather than family. When we returned to the living room, Emma had found a spot on the floor near her cousins, but wasn't quite included in their play. Around 4:30, my mother appeared in the archway connecting the living room to the dining room. She tapped a spoon against her crystal glass, a familiar signal from my childhood that meant an announcement was coming. "Dinner is ready," she announced with a practiced hostess smile. "Everyone please make your way to the dining room." The family rose in a collective movement, conversations pausing as everyone filed toward the formal dining room. I took Emma's hand and gestured for Noah to follow as we joined the procession. The scene that greeted us in the dining room struck me like a physical blow. My mother's antique mahogany table had been extended to its full length and covered with her finest linen tablecloth. Atop it sat her best china, crystal glasses, and polished silver, all arranged with mathematical precision. A magnificent centerpiece of autumn flowers and candles ran down the middle, flanked by serving dishes of steaming food. But what froze me in place were the place settings. Exactly 12 of them, one for each person present, except for me and my children. For a moment, I thought there must be a mistake. Perhaps we were seated at a separate kids' table? But a quick glance around revealed no other dining arrangement. As family members found their seats, clearly marked with elegant place cards, my children and I remained standing uncertainly in the doorway. Emma's hand tightened in mine as the awkwardness stretched. Finally, my father noticed us hovering. "Nancy," he said to my mother, who was directing people to their seats, "where are Heather and the kids sitting?" My mother barely looked up from adjusting a napkin. "Oh, I couldn't fit 3 more at the table. Space is tight as it is." She gestured vaguely toward the kitchen. "They can eat at the breakfast nook after the first round. Or take plates to the patio furniture if the weather holds." The casual cruelty of her words hung in the air. Thomas looked uncomfortable, his girlfriend confused. Aunt Judith suddenly became very interested in arranging her napkin on her lap. No one spoke up. Noah, not fully understanding but sensing the tension, looked up at me with confusion. "Mommy, where do we sit?" Before I could answer, my mother interjected. "The children could sit at the counter in the kitchen if they're hungry now. Heather, you could help serve and then eat after. Like the help, not like family." Emma, old enough to fully comprehend what was happening, pressed against my side. I could feel her small body trembling slightly. My cousin Rebecca's husband David cleared his throat. "We could squeeze together on this side," he suggested, though the table was already uncomfortably crowded. No, my mother said firmly. "I've arranged everything just so. It would throw off the whole setting. The whole setting, more important than her daughter and grandchildren." "We brought pumpkin pie," Emma said in a small voice, still clutching the container we'd carried in. "Mommy made it from scratch." My mother glanced at the container dismissively. "You can leave it on the counter. We have plenty of desserts already prepared." I stood there, paralyzed by humiliation, as everyone else settled into their chairs. My father said a brief grace, and serving dishes began circulating around the table. Conversation resumed as if nothing unusual was happening, as if it was perfectly normal for family members to be left standing in the doorway during Thanksgiving dinner. Noah tugged at my hand. "I'm hungry, Mommy," he whispered, loud enough that several heads turned briefly our way before quickly averting their eyes. That was the moment something inside me broke. And simultaneously, something else hardened into resolve. I've always been the peacekeeper in my family, the one who smoothed things over, who accommodated others' feelings at the expense of my own. But standing there in my parents' dining room doorway, with my children bewildered and hurt beside me, I knew with sudden clarity that this pattern couldn't continue. "Emma, Noah," I said quietly but firmly, "we're leaving." Emma looked up at me, relief washing over her features even as tears threatened to spill from her eyes. Noah just looked confused. "But what about the turkey?" he asked. "We'll find something better," I promised, trying to keep my voice steady. I turned to address the table, where 12 people were now pointedly focusing on their plates. "We won't be staying for dinner. Thank you for the invitation, but we decline." My mother's head snapped up, her expression a mixture of irritation and surprise, not at what she had done, but that I was reacting to it. "Don't be dramatic, Heather," she said sharply. "You're making a scene over nothing. We simply don't have enough space." "You had 2 months to plan this dinner," I replied, struggling to keep my voice even. You knew exactly how many people were coming. This was a deliberate choice. My father put down his fork with a sigh of exasperation. For heaven's sake, Heather. The children can eat in the kitchen. It's not the end of the world. It's Thanksgiving, I said, my voice finally breaking. Family sits together at Thanksgiving. Well, sometimes accommodations have to be made, my mother replied. If you'd called earlier to confirm you were coming. I RSVP'd when you invited us, I interrupted. 2 months ago. And I called last week to ask what I could bring. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Thomas looked like he wanted to say something but remained silent, his girlfriend watching the exchange with wide eyes. Let's go get our coats, I told the children, turning away from the table. As we headed toward the entryway where we'd left our jackets, I heard chairs scraping. My Aunt Judith's voice carried down the hall. Nancy, I can't believe you did that to your own grandchildren. In the hallway, Emma's composure finally broke. Silent tears streamed down her face as I helped her into her coat. Why doesn't Grandma want us here? Noah asked, his little face crumpled in confusion. The question stabbed through me like a knife. How could I explain to a 6-year-old child that his grandmother's need for control and appearances outweighed her love for him? Sometimes grown-ups make bad choices, I said, kneeling to zip his jacket. This isn't about you. You didn't do anything wrong. My mother appeared in the hallway as I was gathering our things. Her posture was rigid, her lips pressed into a thin line. You're overreacting, she said. If you leave now, you're ruining Thanksgiving for everyone. I straightened up, looking her directly in the eyes. No, Mom. You ruined Thanksgiving when you decided your grandchildren weren't important enough to have seats at your table. That's not what happened, she protested. We simply don't have space. Yes, I heard you the first time. I reached for the pumpkin pie Emma was still clutching. We'll take this with us. I'm sure you have plenty of desserts already prepared. My father appeared behind my mother, his face flushed with irritation. Heather, stop this nonsense right now. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. No, Dad. For once, I'm acknowledging the mountain instead of pretending it's a molehill. As we moved toward the front door, I heard my mother's voice, not quite low enough, say to my father, I told you she shouldn't have come anyway. Always so sensitive. The words hit me like a slap. After everything, after the humiliation of being left standing in the doorway, after my children were treated as afterthoughts, she still believed I was the problem. I ushered the kids outside, helping them into the car as quickly as possible. Emma was quietly crying now, trying to hide her tears. Noah looked shell-shocked, clutching his turkey drawings that no one had wanted to see. As I pulled out of the driveway, the weight of what had just happened pressed down on me. The kids were hungry. It was Thanksgiving, and I had nothing prepared at home. All the grocery stores would be closed. 5 miles down the road, I spotted a McDonald's with its lights on. Not ideal, but it was food. How about a special Thanksgiving Happy Meal? I suggested, forcing cheerfulness into my voice. Noah perked up immediately. Fast food was a rare treat in our household, but Emma just stared out the window. Inside the McDonald's, we were the only customers. The teenage cashier looked bored, but managed a smile as we approached. Happy Thanksgiving, she said. What can I get you? 3 Big Mac meals, please, I replied. And 2 Happy Meals? We settled into a booth with our food. I arranged it on the tray as festively as possible, putting the French fries in a circle around the burgers like a makeshift feast. Look, I said, unwrapping a napkin with a flourish, fancy Thanksgiving napkins. Noah giggled, but Emma remained quiet, picking at her food. I said gently, I'm sorry about what happened. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. Why does Grandma hate us? The question gutted me. She doesn't hate us, sweetheart. Grandma and Grandpa. I struggled to find words that wouldn't vilify my parents while still acknowledging the truth. They have very specific ideas about how things should be, and sometimes they forget what's really important. Like family. Noah asked around a mouthful of burger. Exactly like family, I confirmed. We ate our unconventional Thanksgiving dinner, and I tried my hardest to lighten the mood. We played I Spy, made up stories about the people in the drive-thru, and shared what we were thankful for. By the time we finished our apple pies, the kids seemed less devastated, though Emma remained subdued. The drive home to our apartment felt endless. Both children fell asleep in the back seat, emotionally drained from the day's events. As I navigated the quiet streets, tears I'd been holding back finally escaped, streaming silently down my face. For years, I'd made excuses for my parents' behavior. They're just old-fashioned. They have high standards. They show love in different ways. But today had stripped away all pretense. Their actions weren't about lack of space at a table. They were about putting me and my children in our place, a place apart, less than, not quite family. When we arrived home, I carried Noah to his bed and guided a sleepy Emma to hers. After tucking them in, I sank onto my couch in the quiet apartment and let myself fully feel the pain, humiliation, and anger I'd been suppressing for the sake of the children. The Thanksgiving that was supposed to heal our family had instead revealed the depth of the wound. And I realized, with a clarity that felt both terrible and liberating, that it was time to stop trying to heal something that one side was determined to keep broken. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake replaying the events at my parents' house, each memory bringing fresh waves of hurt and anger. Around 3 a.m, I gave up on sleep altogether and moved to the living room with a cup of tea and a notebook. Perhaps it was the quiet darkness or the emotional exhaustion, but my mind began to trace patterns I'd previously refused to see. The Thanksgiving table incident wasn't an isolated event. It was merely the most obvious manifestation of a lifelong dynamic. I started writing, documenting incidents I'd previously dismissed or excused. My high school graduation party, where my mother had introduced me to her friends as our perfect daughter, while simultaneously criticizing my choice of dress when no one else could hear. My college acceptance letters, which my father had shown to everyone at his office, but then questioned why I hadn't applied to more prestigious schools. The way they'd undermined my confidence in Brandon from the beginning, pointing out his flaws while never acknowledging his kindness or how happy he made me. How after our divorce, they'd offered help in ways that would increase my dependence on them rather than support my independence. The subtle ways they favored Thomas, despite his less stable career path and personal choices. The countless times they'd given gifts to my children with strings attached or used to highlight my perceived inadequacies as a parent. The pattern was undeniable. Their love had always been conditional, available in full measure only when I conformed to their expectations. When I diverged from their script for my life, their support and affection withdrew accordingly. As dawn broke, my phone chimed with a text from Rachel, my best friend since college. "How was Thanksgiving with the family? Thinking of you." Rather than trying to explain via text, I called her. "You won't believe what happened," I said when she answered, my voice raspy from lack of sleep. I recounted the previous day's events. "They did what?" Rachel exclaimed when I described the dining room scene. "Heather, that's not just rude, that's cruel. Especially to the kids." "I know," I said, the validation from an outside perspective strengthening my resolve. "And the worst part is, I don't think they even see it that way." My mother genuinely seemed surprised that I was upset. "Because she's never had to face consequences for treating you this way," Rachel pointed out. "You've always forgiven them, made excuses for them, tried harder to please them." Her words hit home. "You're right. I've spent my entire adult life trying to earn their approval, and they've spent it moving the goalposts." We talked for over an hour, Rachel listening as I processed my thoughts aloud. Unlike my parents, she asked questions instead of making pronouncements, offered support without conditions. "So what now?" she finally asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "I can't pretend nothing happened. I can't go back to Sunday phone calls and forced holiday visits, not after this." "Then don't," Rachel said simply. You're allowed to set boundaries, Heather. You're allowed to protect yourself and your kids from people who hurt you, even if those people are your parents. After we hung up, I sat with that thought. Boundaries. The concept wasn't new to me. I'd read about them in self-help books, discussed them in the therapy sessions I'd attended after my divorce. But I'd never seriously applied the concept to my relationship with my parents. What would boundaries with Robert and Nancy Mitchell actually look like? I opened my notebook again and began a new list. This one wasn't of past hurts, but of future protections. No more subjecting the children to situations where they might be treated as less than. No more accepting criticism disguised as help. No more rearranging our lives to accommodate my parents' expectations. No more pretending their behavior is acceptable. The list felt right, but incomplete. Something was still nagging at me, some unfinished business that needed addressing before I could move forward with these new boundaries. I went to my desk and pulled out a folder labeled Family Business. Inside were records of the many ways I'd supported my parents over the years, often at my own expense. Financial records showing the $5,000 emergency loan I'd given them 3 years ago when their roof needed unexpected repairs, money they'd never repaid despite my tight budget as a newly single mother. Documentation of the family heirlooms my grandmother had specifically left to me in her will, which somehow remained in my parents' house, for safekeeping. Receipts for the high-end KitchenAid mixer and Vitamix blender I'd lent my mother temporarily that she now considered her own. Files related to my father's small business website and social media accounts, which I'd been managing for free since my marketing background made me the obvious choice. I'd given freely, expecting nothing in return except perhaps appreciation. Instead, my generosity had been taken for granted, my contributions minimized or forgotten entirely. A plan began to take shape in my mind. If my parents wanted to treat me as less than family, then perhaps it was time to formalize that relationship in ways they would understand. I spent the morning creating a detailed inventory of everything I had lent, given, or done for my parents that could reasonably be reclaimed or discontinued. The list was longer than I'd initially realized. Beyond the tangible items, there were countless hours of unpaid labor, managing their online presence, helping organize family events, providing free childcare for my cousins' children during family gatherings while my own parents rarely reciprocated. When Emma and Noah woke up later that morning, I made them chocolate chip pancakes, a special treat to brighten the day after Thanksgiving. "Are we going to see Grandma and Grandpa today?" Noah asked as he drowned his pancakes in syrup. "No, sweetheart. We're going to have a special day, just the 3 of us instead." Emma studied me carefully, her 8-year-old perception surprisingly acute. "Are you mad at them because they didn't let us sit at the table?" I put down my coffee cup, considering how to respond. My children deserved honesty, but not the burden of adult conflicts. "I'm not mad," I said finally. "I'm sad. What happened yesterday wasn't right, and it wasn't your fault. Sometimes, even grown-ups don't treat each other with respect. Like when Justin pushed Max on the playground and had to sit in timeout?" Noah asked, referencing a recent incident at school. I smiled despite myself. "Something like that. Except grown-ups don't get put in timeout. Instead, we have to decide for ourselves how to respond when someone doesn't treat us well." "What did you decide?" Emma asked quietly. "I decided that we deserve to be around people who make us feel loved and important," I told her. "And sometimes that means spending less time with people who don't." Emma nodded, seeming to absorb this. "Even if those people are family?" "Even then," I confirmed. "Being family is special, but it doesn't give anyone the right to make you feel bad about yourself." After breakfast, we spent the day decorating our apartment for Christmas, watching holiday movies, and baking cookies. I made a point of being fully present, pushing thoughts of my parents aside to focus on creating a joyful day for my children. That evening, after the kids were in bed, I finalized my plan. I would reclaim what was rightfully mine, not out of pettiness or revenge, but as a concrete step toward establishing boundaries and self-respect. I would take back my possessions, my time, and most importantly, my power in the relationship. I knew my parents would be attending their church's holiday bazaar the following Saturday, a full-day event they never missed. It would be the perfect opportunity to retrieve my belongings without a confrontation. I also knew where they kept the spare key, having used it countless times to water plants or check on the house when they traveled. The plan wasn't about hurting them, it was about healing myself. About showing my children through actions, not just words, that we deserved respect. That we could stand up for ourselves with dignity. With my decision made, I slept soundly for the first time since Thanksgiving. The week passed in a blur of work, school drop-offs, and preparations. My parents called twice, my mother on Friday, my father on Sunday, but I let both calls go to voicemail. My mother's message was predictably self-justifying. Heather, I don't understand why you're making such a fuss over the seating arrangements. We did the best we could with the space available. Call me back so we can move past this nonsense. My father's was more direct. Your mother is upset. Call her and apologize for overreacting on Thanksgiving. This silent treatment is childish. Neither message acknowledged any wrongdoing or expressed concern for how their grandchildren had been affected. Their responses only reinforced my resolve. On Wednesday evening, I called my brother Thomas. We'd always had a complicated relationship, not close, but not antagonistic either. As the favored child, he'd been largely oblivious to the different standards our parents held us to. Hey, what's up? He answered, sounding distracted. I wanted to let you know I'll be stopping by Mom and Dad's on Saturday to pick up some things that belong to me, I said, getting straight to the point. Oh! There was a pause. They mentioned you guys left Thanksgiving early. Mom said you got upset over nothing. Thomas, they didn't have places for us at the table. They left their grandchildren standing in the doorway while everyone else ate. How would you characterize that? Another pause, longer this time. Yeah, that was pretty bad. Melissa couldn't believe it. She kept asking me afterward if that was normal for our family. And what did you tell her? He sighed. I told her no, but I don't know, Heather. The more I think about it, the more I realize maybe it's not that unusual. They've always been harder on you than on me. His acknowledgement, however belated, meant more than I expected. Anyway, I continued, I'm picking up some things on Saturday. Grandma's jewelry that was supposed to be mine, the kitchen appliances I lent Mom, some childhood mementos. I'm not taking anything that isn't rightfully mine. They're going to be pissed, Thomas warned. Probably, I agreed. But I'm done letting that dictate my actions. After some more conversation, Thomas surprised me. Do you want me to be there? For support or as a witness or whatever? The offer touched me. Thanks, but this is something I need to do myself. I appreciate you understanding. For what it's worth, I'm sorry I didn't say anything at Thanksgiving. I should have. Yes, you should have, I agreed, not letting him off the hook entirely. But thanks for acknowledging that now. Saturday morning arrived bright and cold. I'd arranged for Rachel to watch Emma and Noah, telling them I had some errands to run. They were happy enough to spend time with Aunt Rachel, who always brought fun crafts and games. As I drove to my parents' house, I mentally rehearsed what I would do. I had brought boxes and bags for the items I planned to take. I knew exactly where everything was located, an advantage of having spent so much time in their home over the years. Their driveway was empty when I arrived, confirming they were at the church bazaar as expected. I used the spare key from under the decorative rock in the garden. They'd never changed its location despite my suggestions to do so for security reasons. Standing in their entryway, I was struck by a wave of memories, some good, many complicated. The house I'd grown up in felt simultaneously familiar and foreign. I took a deep breath and began my methodical retrieval. First, the kitchen. The KitchenAid mixer and Vitamix blender sat prominently on the counter, appliances I'd purchased with my first big marketing bonus and lent to my mother just until the renovation is done. That had been 4 years ago. I packed them carefully in their original boxes, which I'd stored in my own basement. Next, my grandmother's jewelry. My mother kept it in a velvet-lined drawer in her bedroom vanity. According to my grandmother's will, the antique pearl necklace, emerald ring, and gold locket were specifically bequeathed to me. Yet somehow, after the funeral, these pieces had remained in my mother's possession, for safekeeping until you're more settled, she'd said. Well, I was settled now, and these treasured family heirlooms belonged with me and eventually Emma. In the guest room closet, I found boxes of my childhood memorabilia, report cards, art projects, awards, and photographs. My mother had always been meticulous about preserving these things, which I'd previously interpreted as loving attention to my history. Now I wondered if it had been more about documenting her successful parenting than preserving my memories. I selected items that held personal significance. My high school yearbooks, the science fair medal I'd won in 8th grade, the collection of handwritten stories I'd created as a child. I left behind anything that felt more like evidence of their parenting than genuine mementos of my life. In my father's office, I accessed his computer. The password had been my birth date for years, and downloaded all the files related to his business website and social media accounts that I'd been managing. I then removed my administrator access from all platforms after carefully documenting all login information in a sealed envelope I left on his desk. The last item on my list was the emergency fund. 3 years ago, when my parents' roof had unexpectedly needed replacing, I'd lent them $5,000 from my savings, money that had been earmarked for my own home down payment. They'd promised to repay me within 6 months, but whenever I'd gently brought it up since then, they'd changed the subject or claimed financial constraints despite their comfortable lifestyle. I knew they kept emergency cash in a fireproof safe in their closet. My father had shown it to me when asking me to check on the house during their vacations. The combination was my mother's birth year. Inside, as expected, were several envelopes of cash, clearly labeled car repairs, home maintenance, travel fund, and so on. I hesitated, moral qualms surfacing. Taking cash felt different from reclaiming objects that were indisputably mine. But then I remembered how I'd struggled to pay for Noah's asthma medications the month after lending them that money, how I'd had to pick up extra teaching shifts while they took a weekend trip to a bed and breakfast to recover from the stress of the roof repairs. I found an envelope containing exactly $5,000 labeled home improvements. I removed the cash, replacing it with a detailed receipt I'd prepared. Repayment of $5,000 emergency loan provided on April 15, 2022, originally promised to be returned within 6 months. Terms fulfilled on December 2, 2025. With my car loaded, I returned to the house for one final task. At the dining room table, the very table where my family had been excluded, I sat down and wrote a letter explaining my actions. Dear Mom and Dad, today, I reclaimed items that rightfully belong to me, some of which I've been asking to have returned for years. I've also terminated my unpaid work managing Dad's business accounts. Login information is in the envelope on his desk, and reclaimed the $5,000 loan that was never repaid. This isn't about revenge for Thanksgiving. That incident was merely the culmination of a pattern that's existed my entire adult life, a pattern where my value in this family seems directly tied to my compliance with your expectations. I'm not cutting you out of my life or my children's lives. But our relationship needs to change. I will no longer accept being treated as less than, nor will I allow Emma and Noah to believe that's what they deserve from family. When you're ready to have a relationship based on mutual respect rather than control and conditional approval, I'm open to that conversation. Until then, I've returned your spare key and ask that you respect my boundaries by not coming to my home unannounced or contacting my children directly without my permission. Heather. I left the letter propped against the centerpiece on the dining room table where it couldn't be missed. Then I placed their spare house key beside it, closed the front door behind me, and drove away feeling lighter than I had in years. The reaction was swift and explosive, exactly as I'd anticipated. My phone began ringing while I was still unloading the car at my apartment. My father, then my mother, then my father again. I let all calls go to voicemail, focusing instead on finding places for the reclaimed items in our home. Emma was particularly enchanted with my grandmother's jewelry, especially the gold locket that contained tiny photographs of my great-grandparents. "Will this be mine someday?" she asked, holding the locket carefully in her small palm. "Yes," I told her. "That's how family heirlooms work. They get passed down from generation to generation. It's like a piece of history you can touch," she said with unexpected insight. The voicemails progressed from shocked outrage to wounded indignation. My father threatened legal action, claiming I had stolen from them. My mother alternated between tearful recriminations about how I could do this to my own parents and cold fury over my selfish, ungrateful behavior. I listened to each message once, then saved them in a special folder. Not to revisit and re-injure myself, but as documentation and a reminder of why I'd taken this stand. By Sunday evening, my parents had moved on to recruiting allies. My Aunt Judith called, her voice cautious. "Heather, your mother is beside herself. She says you broke into their house and took things." "I used the spare key they've always kept for me," I clarified. "And I only took items that belong to me, things I've been asking to have returned for years." She mentioned the emergency fund money, a loan they never repaid, despite promising to do so within 6 months. I left a receipt. Judith was quiet for a moment. "The Thanksgiving thing was wrong," she finally said. "What Nancy did to you and the children." I told her so at the time. But not during the dinner itself, I pointed out. Not when it might have made a difference. "You're right," she acknowledged. I should have spoken up sooner. We all should have. The conversation ended civilly, with Judith promising to talk some sense into Nancy, though I had little hope of that succeeding. My brother Thomas called next. "Holy shit," he said when I answered. "The house looks like a crime scene with all the yellow sticky notes Mom's putting on everything, marking what belongs to who so nothing else goes missing." Despite everything, this image made me laugh. Well, at least she's being proactive about property rights now. Dad's talking about changing the locks. They're welcome to do that. I returned their spare key. "Look," Thomas said, his voice turning serious, "I think what you did was extreme, but I get why you did it. That Thanksgiving dinner was messed up. And I should have said something." His acknowledgement meant more than he probably realized. The family quickly divided into camps. My mother's side, including Aunt Patricia and Cousin Rebecca, rallied behind my parents, sharing outraged Facebook posts about the younger generation's entitlement and the death of family respect without naming me directly. My father's younger brother, Uncle David, and his wife reached out with surprising support. "We've watched how they've treated you for years," Uncle David wrote in an email. "It took courage to stand up for yourself and your children. If you need anything, we're here." Most touching was a card that arrived from my young cousin Amber, Rebecca's 16-year-old daughter. "What you did was badass. Grandma Nancy and Grandpa Robert have always been mean to you for no reason. You're my hero for standing up to them." The note made me smile through tears. I hadn't realized the younger generation had been watching and understanding the dynamics I'd tried so hard to normalize. A week after the incident, as it was now being called in family circles, my father showed up at my workplace. I was fortunately teaching an evening class when he arrived, and the department secretary, who had strict instructions not to disrupt classes for personal visits, turned him away. He left a formal-looking envelope with her. Inside was a letter printed on his business letterhead, demanding the return of all stolen property within 48 hours, or he would be forced to take legal action. He'd included an itemized list of what he claimed I'd taken, inflating the value of each item and including several things I hadn't touched. I showed the letter to a lawyer friend, who laughed and said, "He doesn't have a case. Everything you took was either gifted to you, lent by you, or owed to you. His letter is just intimidation." Still, the confrontation at my workplace crossed another line. I emailed my father. Do not come to my workplace again. All future communication must be in writing until further notice. The items I reclaimed were legally mine. I have documentation for everything, including the unpaid loan. I'm open to resolving this conflict through family counseling when you and Mom are ready. 2 weeks passed with no direct contact. Through the family grapevine, I heard my parents were telling everyone I'd had some kind of breakdown, and they were giving me space to come to my senses. The narrative infuriated me, but I refused to engage in public rebuttals. Instead, I focused on rebuilding our family life without the shadow of my parents' disapproval. Emma and Noah gradually stopped asking when they would see their grandparents, especially as the Christmas season brought new activities and experiences. Without the obligation of dividing holiday time between my apartment and my parents' house, I found we had freedom to create our own traditions. We volunteered at a local food bank, attended community events, and spent Christmas Eve with Rachel and her family. My cousin Jessica, who had been at the Thanksgiving dinner, invited us to her family's New Year's gathering. I hesitated, uncertain how I would be received by extended family, but decided to accept. Will Grandma and Grandpa be there? Emma asked as we drove to Jessica's house. No, sweetheart. We probably won't see them for a while. That's okay, she said after a moment of thought. They weren't very nice to us anyway. Her simple assessment struck me with its clarity. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. The New Year's gathering was surprisingly warm. Several relatives made a point of including us, and Jessica's husband Brian pulled me aside at one point. I want you to know that what happened at Thanksgiving. Jessica and I were shocked. We should have said something. Why didn't you? I asked, not accusingly but genuinely curious. He looked uncomfortable. Honestly? Fear. Your parents have this way of making people not want to cross them. Which makes what you did even braver. As January turned to February, I maintained my distance while keeping the door open for reconciliation on new terms. My parents made 2 attempts at contact, once leaving gifts for the children on our doorstep, which I returned with a note reiterating my boundaries, and once having their pastor call me to mediate the situation I politely declined, suggesting a professional family therapist instead. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening in my own life. Without the constant undercurrent of trying to earn my parents' approval, I found new confidence at work. I applied for and received a promotion I might previously have talked myself out of pursuing. I started dating again. Cautiously, just coffee with a fellow teacher named Mark who asked thoughtful questions and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. Most importantly, Emma and Noah were thriving. Without the subtle tension that had always surrounded visits with their grandparents, they seemed more relaxed, more joyful. Noah's teacher commented on his increased participation in class, while Emma's persistent stomachaches, which I now realized had often coincided with planned visits to my parents, disappeared entirely. 6 months after Thanksgiving, my mother sent a letter. Not an email or text, but an actual handwritten letter on her personalized stationery. Heather, your father and I have been doing some reflecting. While we still feel your actions in December were extreme, we recognize that the Thanksgiving dinner arrangements were hurtful to you and the children. We miss Emma and Noah and would like to see them. If you're amenable, perhaps we could meet at a neutral location. That ice cream parlor the children enjoy, perhaps. Mom. Not an apology, exactly, but the closest thing to one I'd ever received from her. No mention of overreaction or making a scene. Just an acknowledgement of hurt and a request rather than a demand. It was a small step, but a step nonetheless. After careful consideration, I replied, Mom, thank you for your letter. I appreciate the acknowledgement that what happened at Thanksgiving was hurtful. I'm open to a short, supervised visit at Whimsical Scoops next Saturday at 2 p.m. Before that happens, though, I need to be clear about my boundaries going forward. 1. My children and I will be treated with the same respect as other family members. 2. Criticism disguised as help or advice is not welcome. 3. If these boundaries are crossed, we will leave immediately. If these terms are acceptable, please confirm, and we'll see you Saturday. Heather. The response came the next day, a simple, "We agree to your terms. See you Saturday." It wasn't resolution or reconciliation, not yet. But it was a beginning, a new beginning, on my terms, with my dignity intact. 1 year has passed since that fateful Thanksgiving, and so much has changed. The saying, "time heals all wounds," isn't quite accurate in my experience. Time alone doesn't heal. It's what happens during that time that determines whether wounds fester or mend. That first ice cream meeting with my parents was awkward but civil. Emma was cautiously friendly, while Noah, with his 6-year-old's capacity for forgiveness, warmed up more quickly. My mother brought small, appropriate gifts, books they could read together. My father asked about their school activities without any backhanded comments about their educational choices. They stuck to safe topics and respected my presence as a buffer. We've established a new rhythm since then. My parents see the children once every few weeks, usually for specific activities, a baseball game, a school play, an afternoon at the park. Always in public places, always with me present. The visits are shorter, but I've noticed more meaningful. Without the pressure of performing perfect grandparenthood for an entire holiday, my parents actually seem to enjoy the children more. Our adult relationship remains distant but cordial. We don't discuss personal matters beyond the children's activities. I haven't been back to their house, nor have they visited mine. This arrangement, while perhaps sad by conventional standards, has brought a peace I never experienced in our previous dynamic. The boundary setting rippled through other areas of my life as well. I declined additional committee assignments at work that wouldn't advance my career. I became more selective about which of Emma and Noah's activities we committed to, prioritizing their genuine interests over overscheduling. I started saying no without apologizing or justifying my decisions. Mark and I have been dating for 10 months now. He met my parents briefly at Emma's school concert and navigated the encounter with grace, picking up on undercurrents, but not pressing for details until we were alone. When I finally shared the full Thanksgiving story, his response was validating without being inflammatory. "They missed out," he said simply. "Not just on Thanksgiving dinner, but on really knowing you and the kids." His perspective, that my parents' behavior reflected their limitations, not my worth, helped cement my own evolving understanding. Perhaps the most profound change has been in my relationship with my children. Without the undercurrent of anxiety that had accompanied every interaction with my parents, I'm more present, more confident in my parenting decisions. Emma and Noah sense this shift. They're more open with me, less careful about behaving perfectly as they'd been around their grandparents. "Mom," Emma asked recently as we decorated our Christmas tree, "remember last Thanksgiving when Grandma and Grandpa didn't have chairs for us?" My heart tightened. "Yes, I remember. I was so sad that day," she continued, hanging a handmade ornament on a branch. "But you know what? I'm glad it happened." "You are?" I asked, surprised. She nodded solemnly. "Because after that, you stopped being sad all the time. And we started doing fun things instead of always going to Grandma's house, where we had to be super quiet and not touch anything." Her perception stunned me. I hadn't realized how visibly my anxiety around my parents had affected her, nor how clearly she'd seen the positive changes in our family life since I'd established boundaries. This Thanksgiving, we created our own celebration. Rachel and her family joined us, along with Mark and 2 of my colleagues who had no local family. We pushed tables together in my small apartment, used mismatched chairs, and served food buffet style on everyday plates. The children made place cards for everyone, decorated with personalized drawings. Noah insisted on saying grace, thanking God for good food and people who are nice to each other. The contrast to last year's experience couldn't have been starker. In place of rigid formality and exclusion, we had warmth, laughter, and belonging. Everyone had a seat at our table. My brother Thomas called that evening after returning from our parents' more subdued Thanksgiving gathering. It was weird without you guys there, he admitted. Mom actually asked me today if I thought you'd consider coming next year. What did you tell her? I said she'd need to ask you herself, and to be prepared to hear no as an answer. He paused. I'm proud of you, Heather. What you did, it changed things. Mom and Dad are different now. Not completely, but they think before they speak more. They're making an effort. His words were gratifying, but I've learned not to base my decisions on others' changes. My boundaries aren't conditional on my parents' improvement. They're necessary for my well-being regardless. The most profound lesson I've learned through all of this is that family is defined by actions, not blood. True family makes room at the table, literally and figuratively. True family sees you, values you, and respects your dignity even when disagreeing with your choices. I've also learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. By demonstrating self-respect to my children, I'm teaching them what they should expect from relationships. Emma and Noah are learning that love shouldn't require diminishing yourself, that healthy boundaries are acts of care rather than rejection. Forgiveness has been another complicated lesson. I've forgiven my parents not because they've fully acknowledged the hurt they caused. They haven't, but because carrying anger was weighing me down. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending the past didn't happen. It means preventing it from controlling my future. As for reconciliation, that remains a work in progress. True reconciliation requires acknowledgement, apology, and changed behavior from all parties. We've taken small steps in that direction, but complete healing may never come, and I've made peace with that possibility. The path forward isn't about perfect resolution, but about continued growth. I'm learning to parent without the shadow of my own childhood, to form relationships without fear of conditional love, to trust my own judgment without seeking external validation. If you're watching this and relating to my experience, please know you're not alone. Family dynamics can be incredibly painful, especially when they're wrapped in the expectation that blood ties trump all other considerations. But standing in your truth, setting healthy boundaries, and prioritizing your well-being isn't selfish, it's essential. Have you ever had to stand up to family who treated you unfairly? What boundaries have you set in your own relationships? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you found value in my journey, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Each time we share these difficult truths, we help others feel less alone in their struggles. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, everyone deserves a seat at the table, especially in the families we choose to build ourselves.